Prime Minister's position remains in peril as a new poll shows her popularity has plummeted and more than half her party want her to resign.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 19th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins. Your top stories this morning.
A day of reckoning for Liz Truss at PMQs today as her popularity plunges to a record minus 70%, with former Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove warning that it's a question of when, not if, the PM goes.
Elsewhere this morning, millions of pensioners could be out of pocket next year after plans to ditch triple lock payouts. It comes as inflation numbers are released later this morning. We'll have more on that.
Families dismissed and valuable lessons ignored. A new NHS Trust report will uncover the failings and gross misconduct provided to women and babies in East Kent over the last 11 years.
And cordoned off. See what we did there? As comedian James Corden apologises for lashing out at restaurant staff in New York. We'll share some insights on the actor's tarnished reputation.
And as always, we love to hear from you. Get in touch the usual way, email or Twitter, those addresses on your screen.
It's just gone 6 o'clock. They're now top story this morning. Liz Truss is fighting to remain in office this morning after scoring a record low of minus 70% in a new YouGov poll. That makes her more unpopular than her predecessor Boris Johnson, who scored minus 53% the day he resigned back in July.
Well, it follows the criticism that the PM is betraying pensioners by ditching her promise to protect triple lock pensions, causing a revolt within the Conservative Party.
Well, let's speak to one of those Conservative members now. Holly Whitbread is the Conservative councillor for Epping and Thaden. Holly, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us this morning. First of all, is this what you're hearing at the grassroots level?
I think it's mixed. I think what members most want now is a little bit of stability. I think people welcome the fact the government apologised for going too far, too fast. I mean, I'm someone who supported Liz Truss, and I do accept the diagnosis of the economy, but I think the way the budget was administered was just, as the government have said, too far, too fast.
And on the suggestion that now members have this sort of buyer's remorse, if you like, I mean, you say you've got a mixed bag, but this YouGov poll yesterday showing more than half think she should resign now. And then this YouGov poll out this morning saying her popularity at a record minus 70%. Is she still damaging to, the Conservative Party at this stage?
I think it's really difficult, but I think what we don't need now is more instability, and that's what I'm hearing from members. I think many people welcome Jeremy Hunt becoming the Chancellor and actually putting some of those stabilising economic measures in place.
Even the triple lock abandonment?
I don't think many members support that, and actually we've seen overnight, I was looking at my Twitter feed, a lot of MPs saying they just wouldn't support that. I think at the moment, from what I understand, everything's to play for. They're kind of reviewing the whole budget in its entirety. Obviously, there's a strong defence for defence. That's really important to people. But I think that triple lock for pensioners is also really key to the Parliamentary Party and those members more widely.
Yeah, enthusiasm can't be that high, though, for a lot of people that voted for Liz Truss. And basically, they're getting Liz Truss with Rishi Sunak's policies. But I do accept the argument that there must be stability. Mm-hmm. If that's the best they can hope for, that's not massively inspiring, is it?
Well, I think where there is a little bit of kind of positivity and hope for the future is that actually that long-term agenda for growth hasn't gone, but it's about steering the country through this really difficult economic time. So I think there's a realism with members. We can't go through another election process. I mean, we had a whole summer of kind of debating ideology, but we do need to get on with the job and deliver for the people. And I think that's got to be the priority rather than internal party wars.
Yeah, and look, one, stability is obviously, I mean, Jeremy Hunt stated it now as his absolute number one focus ahead of even growth. How important then will PMQs be today for the Prime Minister? Because if she stumbles at the dispatch box, she's going to fall. This is her last chance. She's on notice, isn't she?
She's got to perform today. I think she really has to step up. I mean, she's come out, she's apologised for the mistakes that were made in terms of that mini-budget and how it was implemented. Now she needs to come out fight it and actually show the long-term positivity, but what we're going to do in the immediate term to sort out the problems which the country are facing.
We've asked you what the opinion is amongst Conservative grassroots members. What are you hearing from floating voters, from people who aren't massively politicised? Mm-hmm. How do you convince them that it's going to be all right? you know...
Well, really interestingly, actually, in Epping Forest, we had a by-election on Thursday, which we won against the Greens. So we actually gained a seat on the council, a really good local young candidate. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But I knocked on hundreds of doors during that period. And that stability thing keeps coming back. People are really worried about the kind of international problems that we're facing, the issues in Ukraine. I think that's probably at the forefront of people's mind, as well as cost of living and the challenges around that. So I think people are actually still to be convinced. I don't think they're won over completely by Labour at the moment. I think they want to see the Conservatives return to stability and delivering for the people. So when we kind of talk about future elections and floating voters, I think it's still all to play for. And I think last time I came on here, I said a week's a long time in politics, but at the moment, hours are a long time in politics.
I mean, it feels like when Jeremy Hunt made that statement to camera on Monday morning, feels like weeks ago, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Look, there's so much that could happen in the next few days, as you say. We've talked about, you know, how important PMQs is. What about those suggestions that there are all these plots going on behind the scenes? And, you know, this is a very ununited, disunited party at the moment. How do you bring all those factions together behind her? Because she does, to many people, just represent someone who's lost all authority.
I think at the moment, I mean, the parliamentary party need to focus on the real issues that are at hand. Jeremy Hunt has come in. There's a more kind of stable economic vision, and I think that they need to come in behind that at the moment and try and deliver on that. So, you know, I think from a kind of grassroots level, what I want to see is a bit more unity in the parliamentary party at this time to just try and focus on the immediate issues that we're facing.
Yeah, really good to get your thoughts this morning, Holly. Thank you very much. Holly Whitbread there, councillor for Epping and Faden. It is 7 minutes past 6. Of course, if you want to get involved with the conversations this morning, we do love to hear from you.
Yes, we do.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, a damning report into the care provided to women and babies at East Kent Hospitals University NHS Foundation Trust will be published today.
The inquiry by Dr Bill Kirkup and a panel of experts is expected to describe how newborns died due to poor care, spanning several years, with a lack of healthcare staff likely to be a contributing factor.
Well, we will be addressing this subject throughout the course of the morning. Lots of concerns about, you know, whether or not this is just a problem that is trust-centric, or if indeed there is a crisis within midwifery altogether. We can talk to our guest now. She's just coming in to the studio, retired midwife, I should say, Nagma Taymuran Yates. A very good morning to you, Nagma. Always lovely to see you.
Hello, nice.
Fresh face, bright and early. Look, let's focus first of all on this report then from East Kent Hospitals University NHS Foundation Trust. What was your understanding as to what happened there?
I actually read the report and I understood that there were babies who were around a few hours old and up to a few weeks old, and their lives were lost. So there has been some errors somewhere with their antenatal care, labour care and neonatal care, perhaps.
Yeah, and what are the challenges at the moment facing? I mean, obviously, maybe you can't comment in detail about this specific case, but what are the challenges that midwives face?
The most important challenge that we are all facing is shortage of staff, the staff shortages. And I always say it's probably funding, you know. Staff shortages is putting a massive strain on staff and consequently is going to be the women who are getting at the end not the good deal.
From this report, from what I could see, they were saying that lessons were learned and that the concerns of families were dismissed. Two things that, as a prospective parent, when you're going to look at where you're going to have your baby, if you hear those things, those are absolute red flags. I mean, why would you dismiss the concerns of worried parents?
Massive, because we don't tend to learn from previous experiences and previous mistakes or errors. You remember I came here and we were discussing the Ockenden report. And really, if we are going to be learning with what has happened before, we should have learned by now because there were recommendations. But again, those recommendations are all well and good. But once you want to put it in practice and you haven't got the adequate staffing, it makes life very difficult.
So give us an example, give us an insight into a day in the life of a midwife, of someone working on a maternity ward, how much busier it is because there aren't enough staff.
It is a lot busier because when I look at the unit that I used to work in, how many women we were delivering, how many babies we had, and how many staff we had per shift.
Yeah.
Now we are still running with the same number of staff, but our delivery rate has actually nearly doubled.
Right. So are staff doing longer days, or are they just trying to cram more into one shift?
Well, we are doing longer days now because we are now doing 2 shifts of 12 and 13-hour shifts. And these are the staff who are working for 12, 13 hours night duty without a break.
And this is what you are retired, but this is what you are hearing from
Yes,
people who are still working in the profession. Yeah. And are they thinking of staying in the profession or leaving because of it? Is it kind of a self-fulfilling thing?
At the moment, the girls that I'm in touch with, which is quite a few girls, they are all staying, but they are all at the situation in life and the place in their lives that they can't afford not to be there. But we have got a lot of newly qualified staff, and that is where the problem with retention comes. Your retention are not the people who are older in the job. Your retention are the newly qualified.
Who come in and feel they aren't able to give the kind of care that they'd hope to.
And also they are not getting the adequate support.
Right.
You know, when you think about the recommendations with regards to adequate and robust training for all, that training is not only what we have in the classroom or what we do on the computer. It is also one-to-one to get help and teaching from the more experienced midwives.
Yeah,
and there is lack of experience now as well, which is massive.
Have you been asked to return to the profession at all? Have they made any offers to you? Would you consider it?
If they had asked me, I would have stayed at a blink of an eye because I took early retirement. I'm still young, fit, healthy, and I keep saying that I was at the best time of my professional life.
Why did you take early retirement then? I have to ask.
I took early retirement because really of the pattern of the shifts. So you could actually, because it's the computer now, which it does the off-duty for us, so you could actually be working on a Sunday night and Monday morning your holiday starts.
Right, OK, which kind of bleeds into your holiday, really.
Bleeds into your holiday.
So you get less holiday.
So if I could actually have a good... And this is what the girls are all upset about with regards to their annual leave and holidays. They are not approved early when they are approved. And this is all in the country. And when it is approved, it's far too late for you to book something, or you are going to be losing, as you said, bleeding into your annual leave. So, yeah, and I was young and I wanted to get out there and... trot the globe.
I've had enough of this.
It's just so sad to hear, you know, somebody as talented as you, and to hear about these new recruits who are drawn to what is a beautiful job. It is a wonderful job. I've often thought I would love to be a midwife. I mean, seeing new life come into the world is a vocation, but for people to be leaving in their droves because they aren't able to give the care that they want to has to be a huge tragedy. And I suppose what the problem with all of this is, you know, when women are coming through and having babies, a lot of them, it's their only experience of coming into the NHS.
Yeah.
And if they're having bad experiences, the worst experience being that they lose, heaven forbid, their child.
And they are very vulnerable. They are at their most vulnerable. It's an experience that they have never had before. And when you've got situations like this on the news, it is petrifying. And our job as midwives and obstetricians is to reassure them that we are keeping them safe and we are doing our utmost to make sure that they are safe.
Yeah.
Well, we were hoping to speak to the report author Louise Page this morning, who has done this report into these hospitals in East Kent. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that, but we will try and make sure we do that before the end of the programme. But now, we're really good to get your perspective. It is the midwives at the end of the day who are just so absolutely important in all of this. And, yeah, trying to keep midwife retention of those jobs just absolutely key. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It is 6:14. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening this morning. The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace reportedly in Washington to discuss security concerns, including Russia's war with Ukraine. Comes after Moscow said the 4 regions that illegally annexed in Ukraine now fall under the protection of Russia's nuclear arsenal.
A Economists warn that inflation will have returned to double figures in September due to rising food prices. It comes ahead of the release of the latest cost of living figures by the ONS later this morning. Food inflation is predicted to have jumped to 14.3% from 13.1% in August.
The charity is urging the footballing community to support the rights of LGBTQ+ people at next month's World Cup. Same-sex relationships are criminalised in Qatar, and the charity Stonewall says players and fans should call out the nationwide persecution.
Now then, we talk about sleep a lot on this programme, partly because all of our team is sleep deprived, ourselves included.
Yeah.
But there's a really interesting report out today that says not getting enough sleep increases older adults' risk of multiple chronic diseases. And wait for it, if you're over 50 and not getting enough sleep, it's associated with a 25% increased risk of death. So are you getting enough sleep? Why are you awake at 6:16 this morning?
Yeah.
We want to hear from you. What are your sleep patterns like, and do you value it? Because a lot of people sort of don't prioritise their sleep, do they?
Yeah, perhaps we should. No, not perhaps. We absolutely
definitely should, yeah.
Because after exercise and eating well, or actually...
Well, they're on a par, aren't they?
They're on a par. I was ranking them there. But yeah, along with nutrition and exercise, sleeping is, of course, really important. But it can be difficult to get, and especially when so many people out there are worrying about how they're going to pay the bills, and about prices, and about squeezed incomes, job security, etc. You know, it's difficult. So,
yes.
How do you get the best night's sleep?
Yeah, what are your top tips for getting a good night's sleep if you are struggling? Because it is absolutely key we get our sleep. 25% increased risk of death if you're not getting enough sleep. It's a stark warning if you're 50 and over.
After the break, we find out about a local scheme that takes stolen money and valuables from criminals and reinvests it back into the community. But first, the weather.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. The rest of this week promises some pretty heavy showers, and at times it's going to be gusty, particularly today over parts of Wales and southwest England. But with the winds coming up from the south, it's always going to be fairly mild. Bit of a scrap going on between low pressure down to the southwest and high up to the northeast. That's going to keep things fine for most of today across Scotland and indeed much of eastern England. But further west, we've got weather fronts and some heavy showers around this morning through parts of Wales and Northern Ireland, slowly drifting northwards. A few of those downpours affecting the West Midlands, maybe later on into northwest England. Further south and east, most places dry, some good spells of sunshine across western parts of Scotland, and it is pretty mild. Temperatures into the teens in most places, high teens across the south where we see a bit of sunshine, perhaps feeling a little cooler on some of these eastern coasts as the winds start to pick up. And it will be very blustery across North Wales, West Wales through this evening. So gusty winds and more heavy showers to come for Wales, southwest England, and spreading northwards once more to Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn. So wet weather working northwards overnight. Again, further south and east, most places will become dry. Really quite warm night in the south, temperatures likely to stay in the mid-teens in places. A wet start then to tomorrow across maybe the central belts, and that rain will push into northern parts of Scotland through the day, but turning drier across southern Scotland. Most of Wales, Northern Ireland having a much drier and brighter day tomorrow. Could see some showers though coming into parts of East Anglia and the southeast at times. Again, the air is coming up from the south. It's going to be really mild, 14, 15 degrees in the south, 18, 19 where we see some sunshine. And the winds will be lighter tomorrow as well. But the winds are likely to pick up again on Friday. The Isabel squeezing together and that low pressure moving closer, bringing further bands of showers across the country. Some of them will be pretty heavy.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back at 6:21, still to come on the programme this morning.
Actor and comedian James Corden faces a backlash after being rude to restaurant staff in New York. He has said sorry, but what has it done to his reputation? We'll ask our showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci.
And refused entry from shops. We'll speak to the guide dog user who says he's been stopped from using certain services because of his guide dog Giles. His story at 7:45.
Apparently, that's part of a survey as well. It says 81% of guide dog users have found that they've not been allowed into restaurants, into bars, on trains, etc., into shops, supermarkets, which is a legal requirement.
Yes.
81%, which is stunning.
Yeah,
Really
let us know
shocking.
if it affects you, that story, or any of the subjects that we cover this morning. You can get in touch on Twitter or email. Now, every year, the police recover millions of pounds back from criminals, from drugs to sex trafficking. Money involved in crime that's retrieved is then reinvested into something called the Asset Recovery Incentivisation Scheme.
Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has been taking a look at the scheme and how it's helping our local communities.
Making crime pay. That's the idea behind a police scheme that sees money recovered from criminals and then redistributed into our local communities.
The Asset Recovery Incentivisation Scheme is a national scheme. It was introduced in 2006. It's an incentive from the Home Office for police and partner agencies to recoup back some of the money that they get from criminals. That money then is invested into charities or community initiatives.
Each police force is able to decide where the money goes, and last year in Greater Manchester they were able to hand out over £5 million to the most worthy causes.
One of the organisations that benefits from the scheme is Wigan Youth Zone. Here they have a simple goal: to provide the young people of the town somewhere to go, something to do, and someone to talk to.
I'd love to just thank them for how confident they've made me and how amazing this place is and how we couldn't be here without them.
Benjamin has been going to Wigan Youth Zone since he was a young child. He's in college now, but is still a regular face at the centre.
It's important to me because I come here every day. I've met pretty much all my best friends here and I just love coming here, doing all the sports they have to offer.
Organisations in Greater Manchester can apply for up to £20,000 per year. That money can then be used to support their cause, however they see fit.
We received support from GMP to support young people engaging more in outdoor education, in outdoor activities. So we were coming just out of the lockdown. A lot of young people were struggling with mental health. So what this meant was we wanted to engage more of those young people into positive activities and make a difference.
From a climbing wall to just playing pool with your friends, For just 50p a night, the young people of Wigan can access all of this and more.
It's changed the lives of many young people. It's helped young people through those struggling times, and having someone who's just there for them, just for a support mechanism. And a lot of young people have used that.
Taking money from the pockets of criminals and using it to make our communities better and safer. That's what this police scheme is all about. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
There you go.
They talk about the circular economy, don't they? That
Crime,
really is.
crime pays.
Crime pays to go
back the community.
Yeah.
Something like that.
A positive story. Look, stay with us. We're joined by David Mellor and Claire Muldoon to talk through this morning's papers after this.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It is 6:27. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning.
The Prime Minister will be quizzed over her leadership this afternoon at Prime Minister's Questions. Liz Truss will face Sir Keir Starmer for the first time since abandoning her entire economic strategy in the wake of the mini-budget turmoil.
A report into maternity failings at East Kent Hospital's NHS Trust is expected to describe how newborn babies died due to poor care spanning several years. The government is set to respond to the report later today, which will say families were often ignored or had their concerns overlooked.
Campaigners have welcomed the development of a more accurate test for cervical cancer, calling it great news. The test can identify cell changes that could lead to the disease. It can also pick up DNA markers for some other cancers.
Joining us now in the studio is a detective duo, Muldoon and Mellor, to investigate the papers.
Oh,
It's a great name for a TV series.
Mellor and Muldoon.
No, it has to be Mellor and Muldoon.
Mellor and
Why?
Muldoon.
Why?
No.
Why? Ladies first.
Hang on.
Quite right.
What I want to know, who's good cop and who's bad cop?
Bad cop. Yeah, 100%. 100% bad cop.
Or is this bad cop, bad cop? This is bad cop, isn't it?
What a start to the morning.
But can I just say, it was this time last week we were sitting here reviewing the papers and, oh my goodness, so much has happened. From PMQs, where every single answer last week from Liz Truss was about the energy care package that was going to last 2 years, even if the question wasn't about energy.
Yep.
And here we are, post sacking of the Chancellor, a total reversal of all of those policies, the press conference of doom on Friday. Yep. David, what's your assessment, just first of all, on the week?
I'm sure you will recall, and I'd be very happy to watch it be put through again, when you asked Mystic Mellor about what was going to happen. Mystic Mellor said that Kwarteng was toast.
OK, well, what's your
His
prediction for Truss
mysticity
then?
doesn't get... Well, she's toast. The only question is at what point, does it shoot out of the machine,
Yeah.
I mean, look, I can take no pleasure in this. I think it's horrific that a government... I mean, one of the papers was speculating on this is the worst since when John Major went through his problems in 1992. Well, somebody said, even worse than the Suez crisis. Now, I was alive during the Suez crisis, but I don't remember much about it.
What was that,
since I was
53
7,
or something?
56.
56.
But, it's bad for the country, no matter what party you are, if a government looks as though it's completely hopeless.
Well, OK, but have they turned that around? I mean, Jeremy Hunt, total departure from the libertarian wing of the party, making absolutely huge changes. And now, as the Telegraph is saying on their front pages, possibly going after the pensioners, who are obviously core Conservative voters. Is he going too far and too fast himself now, in the other direction?
I hate to admit it because it's not my self-image, but I am a pensioner. But do I really feel working people need to pay more tax in order that I get a link through to inflation as against what the pension could be? And I just think that what we've got to do is realise that if you actually have a situation where increases chase inflation, increases in wages, increases in pensions, you never get inflation down. It never goes away.
Wage price spiral.
And why look in the crystal ball when you can read the book? That's what happened in the 70s.
Yeah, Mystic Muldoon.
Well, I agree. I just...
She's even stealing that now. Nothing sacred.
I just don't get why we haven't learnt the lessons. These are basic economic tools that the government should be employing to get the country out of it. And now we've got Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Do you remember when George Osborne came in as Chancellor? He was blaming the austerity on the Labour government, the previous Labour government. Hunt now will be saying, well, he's got no excuse because this is the direct result of a Conservative party that's led the country to where we are. OK, we've had the pandemic, we've got...
They're not small and insignificant factors,
no,
though,
but we're
war in Ukraine.
We've got the war in Ukraine. There's lots of things happening, but I think...
Brexit, mentioned.
Brett, well, you've mentioned it now. You've opened up an absolute can of worms.
Sorry, but
now.
I mean, is it a factor?
I don't, but because it's a global change. It's a global change.
Yeah,
you can look at America, Asia, everywhere. It's all over. The world economy is basically on its knees, and I think that's what happens when you base far too much of your importance and everything else on stocks and shares, which are not tangible. There's no manufacturing now, but I'll tell you, the only manufacturing country, of course, is China. And China remains extremely quiet over everything that's covering in every single paper. There is no mention of what's happening in China at the moment.
Do you agree with David about the pensions and the triple lock? Because later this morning we're going to hear the latest inflation figures, which are expected to pass 10% overall inflation, and the triple lock on the pension will be pegged to that next April.
It will be pegged to that
if they decide to keep it in line.
If they decide, but they've got the benefits as well, because last week we were talking about should benefits be linked to inflation or earnings. So again, it's chasing the inflation, chasing the higher rate. I don't think it should be. I really don't, because we just don't have the money.
Difficult political message to sell, though, David. You're going to get less benefits and less pensions for people who are hard up.
I think they're in such a mess that they might as well sick it all up and just tell it how it is.
Yeah.
And they've got to do that. But I think what's interesting is you get a little basic competence from Jeremy Hunt, and suddenly, the world can be a better place. I thought that what he had to say was said well, professionally, and carried conviction. It's this awful business where a number of people who shouldn't be within 1 million miles of the highest office in the land are, and that was true of Kwarteng, and it's true of Truss. Perfectly gifted people, but they are not leaders. They don't have the experience to do the jobs they were doing. And I just think with Truss, I mean, bless her heart, how can she humiliate herself further by staying on? I don't get it.
Well, I guess the argument...
The alternative
is instability or a further election or a coronation of somebody or a general election. And none of those look like attractive propositions.
No, but
for
they
the
have to have a
party.
coronation. And, you know, the Conservative Party has got to prove that it can run itself.
But you said they have to have a coronation. Who would they choose? Because there's so
Is that
many...
not quite undemocratic to say that? Because the leader, Liz Truss, was democratically voted by the Conservative membership.
By 160,000 elderly backwards people.
Well, I don't know if that's fair, David. Hang on a minute.
No, but look, in a nation of nearly 60 million people, the idea that it's democratic, that a Prime Minister should be elected by 160-odd thousand untypical people. Why are they untypical? Because they are members of a political party.
So you're saying put it to the people, have an election?
No, I don't. I think the Conservative Party would be mad to do that. Turkey's...
So what's the... You're caught between a rock and a hard...
Yeah. Well, how is one democratic and the other?
Mystic Mellor is a commentator. He does not determine these things. But his mysticity is quite clear, that if there was a general election, the Tories would be badly beaten. So what they have to do is rally round a certain individual, and they have to decide who that individual is and put that individual in.
Do you know what?
Now, I don't think it'll be Sunak, because I just don't think he has enough...
well, we've got Sunak policies here, just not with Rishi Sunak.
Well, no, it's gone further than Sunak policies.
I agree.
But look, there's nothing wrong with Sunak policies. I mean, we had a ludicrous situation, and I speak as a former Chief Secretary of the Treasury, where the job is to actually keep the lid on public expenditure. They were going to give tax breaks to the rich and pay for it on borrowed money. What's conservative about that?
Well, yes, but also what's conservative about now going after the city? I mean, the front of the FT this morning, bank profits in line of fire. And a lot of Conservatives were saying, no, we want a free market. We want to attract investment into the City of London. Most of our public services are funded by the city at the end of the day with the tax revenues that generates. So, you know, what Conservative policies can you see in what's been proposed? Some people are saying what Hunt has said is almost more Labour than Labour now.
Well, I think that there is no party monopoly on common sense. It is common sense not to spend money that you don't have. It's common sense to stop borrowing. Look, we're getting to a situation now where, because of inflation, borrowing is becoming one of the biggest costs to the nation going forward.
And then what if they
and
default?
That's a ridiculous thing.
What if they default and all of that as well?
They can't default.
Well, but moreover, you know, I think from a political point of view, the fact that the Conservatives are completely lost their way. Where is Labour in all of this? Where are they?
Well, they don't have to do anything.
But I would say, I would argue against that, because they have got no manifesto. If it was me in the opposition, I'd be saying, look, why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Here's what we would do. We've heard nothing from Keir Starmer for the past 2 years.
This is the difference between someone who was a politician and someone who wasn't, right? I don't criticise you for not being a politician. It's probably a very good thing that you weren't. But the stupidest thing anyone in politics would ever do is step into the firing line and say what they would do.
But there's no manifesto. There's nothing.
Labour would be stupid not to sit and watch, a bit like, you know, those old ladies knitting under the guillotine, and just watch them get their heads
We've got Jonathan Reynolds coming on, the Shadow Business Secretary, onto the programme this morning. To be fair, we've had a number of shadow frontbench folk over the last few weeks coming on during all of this. Admittedly, we haven't heard from Angela Rayner or Sir Keir Starmer at all, as you say, but you know, they are putting people up. And we are hearing from them.
Yeah. Well, at least Mark Drakeford in Wales is starting to have a bit of fire under his belly at the moment over the NHS in Wales and over the Conservative cuts, etc., what's happening now. We still have heard nothing from Nicola Sturgeon or the SNP, apart from the 180-page report that was manufactured, I would say, and released on Monday of the economic way out for Scotland post-independence, if that was the way to do it. I think politicians in this country are being very laissez-faire. They're being very lazy as well. They're not actually fighting for the people. They're not fighting for us, and they're not getting to grips with the arguments of the wars and the facts of the war in Ukraine at the moment, the triple cap on the pension lock, what's happening to the cap and social care costs. There's nothing happening. And it's awful.
Well, actually,
really,
on the
really
war in
awful.
Ukraine, page 8 and 9 of The Sun, you wanted to talk about Ben Wallace holding crisis talks with the US
in Washington
over Russia.
Yeah.
The Defence Secretary.
The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, flew out, made a last-minute dash to Washington last night to speak with President Biden and the American administration. Putin now is being backed into a corner with weapons that they say are being developed and sold by Iran. And he's in a very, very volatile place. And history will show over the past year that when Putin is pushed to it, he does crazy things, he does really mad things, things that are not well thought out. So there is a real and present danger that this will escalate, possibly, to nuclear war.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the Suez crisis. To have our Defence Secretary going for these secret discussions in Washington, I think it's concerns about a nuclear attack in the Black Sea specifically, although that's speculation from a lot of the papers. But we do know, as Claire says, we do know he's particularly dangerous when cornered. Yesterday, we saw 30% of Ukraine's power plants being targeted by Russian strikes, and Zelensky coming out and saying, we are under attack. It's a grave situation.
What is happening is that war is being made on the ordinary Ukrainian. And that is, of course, a war crime, which we would hope the Russians will be held to account. Putin is losing this war. And by the way, for the avoidance of doubt, I hope it will never come to this, but Putin wouldn't have a chance if things went nuclear. It's not even sure if he pushes a button, anything will happen. Whereas we do know we push a button, the likelihood is something would happen. But we don't want to get to that situation. But the point is, there's a lot of bluster.
Wow.
But what we have to do, surely, is to stick with Ukraine, because the Ukrainians are taking all of the pressure applied by Russia, which if it wasn't Ukraine, it would be somewhere else. And we're very lucky that they're so brave and resolute.
Absolutely.
And David, you wanted to talk about page 2 of The Guardian. The Chinese diplomat summoned after protesters beaten. When was this? What?
That was a demonstration by, a lot of people have come from Hong Kong to settle here who believe in Hong Kong democracy. And they were demonstrating outside the consulate when apparently a number of people shot out of the consulate, dragged them onto consulate terrain, I mean, not indoors, but into the sort of yard, and started beating them up. I regard this as quite serious, you see, because all the while that we're worried about Putin, the country we really should be worried about is China.
That's what I said.
Yeah, and even though you said it, it might be right. Yeah, so basically...
You are so wicked this morning.
You are...
What did you put on this cereal?
Malicious smeller.
Yeah, malicious smeller. Yes, and mystic Muldoon. Anyway, but the reality is that, you cannot have diplomats coming out and beating up demonstrators. It'll be interesting to see what the government does. My view is they should be PNG'd, persona non grata, they should be slung out. But there's little doubt that China is the real threat, because Russia at a certain point becomes busted flush. It's an incompetent economy, whereas China is not an incompetent economy. And, when one thinks back, I was talking the other day at a meeting about the good old days of the Soviet Union. Everyone thought the Soviet Union was an awful place, and so it was. But they were predictable. You knew what they were going to do. Now, I mean, if I was doing some of the jobs I did then, now, I wouldn't have a clue what Russia is going to do or what China is going to do.
Have in common then, the good old days of the Soviet Union.
Well, the reality is that the good old days of the Soviet Union is only because what do people want in life? What do you want in your personal life, in your business life, family life? Predictability.
Speak for yourself.
They were... Well, we don't go down that trail, perhaps. But I hope your dear husband is watching this. But no. But anyway, personally, I think, as I get older, predictability is probably a good thing.
I do understand the point you're trying to make, David. Claire, just finally...
Trying to make.
Where are we going now?
In my usual stumble-bum way.
Let's go to train strikes. That's safe ground, isn't it?
Well, yes, and the
sun's headline.
Oh, for folk's sake. I mean, perfectly done there, perfectly repeated. Bonfire weekend rail strike. Well, do you know what?
How are they going to disrupt?
I was a fan
bonfires?
of Mick Lynch. I was a fan, and I was a great proponent. As I've said volubly here, I did stand up for the strikes. Now I am over them.
How's it
now that
we should? No, it's not about bonfires night for me. It's just the fact
that
it's
is
going on and
Who gets
on
a train
and
to a
on.
bonfire?
We need to stop. It's the weekend. It's the weekend. They're going to stop the football supporters travelling to games, etc. Come on, get a life. Stop this. Sit round the table. Stop the accusations. Stop the leaks to the press. Sit round a table, knock your heads together and get a solution, because this has to stop. This level of militancy that I never thought I would say, because I did support the strikes at the very beginning. I'm sick of it now.
Mick Lynch,
I really, really
Mick Lynch
am.
is not your guy anymore,
No,
is he?
he's not. No, he's not. I've completely fallen out with him now. And to think that these guys, these heads of the Trades Union Council, the TUC, the RMT, quite a lot of the high-end earners of these unions, take-home pay is £150,000 a year. That's something that is, people don't even dream about, let alone think about. And yet these are the driving forces of the people they're supposed to be protecting. That's what I've got an issue of.
I know we probably need to move on, but see, the key thing is when a government is weak, everyone starts to act up. The trades unions leadership, which is a political body, it's not just a body about the economic rights of its members, they will be thinking this is a weak government, it's an unpopular government, so let's get involved.
I'm just interested on that, whether or not the sort of growth in the voice, if you like, of the unions is actually going to be problematic for Sir Keir Starmer as he inches closer to power. And that could actually play into the hands of the Conservatives in a sort of perverse sort of way.
Well, exactly. And of course, there are no respecter of parties, no respecter of government. And what was it Harold Wilson said about, I think it was a dock strike or whatever, a tightly knit group of politically motivated men was what he said. And this was a Labour Prime Minister attacking what has always been the big problem about industrial unrest in this country. The leaders have a motivation above and beyond getting a better deal for their members. They have a political motivation. And the political motivation is, of course, to undermine and bring down the government.
But they would probably say equally political leaders have a political motivation to work that conflict to their advantage as well. Because in this country, there's always been a problem with industrial relations. In places like Germany, they have the unions on the boards of companies. There's a much more consensual relationship.
Yeah, but I wouldn't swap Germany's position for ours.
Well, I just think it's very, very sad that the unions.
No, but there's a thing in the papers today that one of the heads of main German advisors about economic matters was sort of cozying up to the Russians and had a long relationship with the Russians. At least here in this country, people who have big jobs are loyal to the government they're serving. Germany, it's very questionable a lot of the time.
Claire, just very quickly, final word.
It's just so sad that the unions that were brought in at the beginning of these strikes, Easter time, summertime, that's when they first started, haven't got a solution now, because it's the normal working person, us on the streets. We are suffering because of this, and it should have been nipped in the bud well before now, and that's why I'm angry about it.
On the picket lines, they can have bonfires and be around the bonfire. It just looks a bit more kind of dramatic, doesn't it? I don't know, just an idea.
Well, the world, I'm just...
Stop thinking out loud.
So sad what's happening just now.
Yeah.
Right, we'll leave it there from Mella and Muldoon, the dream team. We will see more from you later on in the 7 o'clock, but with the time at 6:48, we're going to bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour.
As we've just been mentioning, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace reportedly in Washington to discuss security concerns, including Russia's war with Ukraine. It comes after Moscow said the 4 regions it illegally annexed in Ukraine now fall under the protection of Russia's nuclear arsenal.
Economists warn that inflation will have returned to double figures in September due to rising food prices. It comes ahead of the release of the latest cost of living figures by the ONS in around 10 minutes' time. We're expecting food inflation to jump to 14.3% from 13.1% in August, but we'll confirm shortly.
A charity is urging the footballing community to support the rights of LGBTQ+ people at next month's World Cup. Same-sex relationships are criminalised in Qatar, and the charity stonewalls as players and fans should call out the nationwide persecution.
Now, the actor and comedian James Corden has apologised after being rude to restaurant staff in New York.
Balthazar owner Keith McNally banned the Late Late Show host from the premises after Corden complained over an omelette.
Well, Stephanie Tetchy's here to tell us all about what's going on with the comedian's reputation. Look, I've been a long believer that the waiter test is how you really spot whether or not someone's a good person or not.
Totally agree,
If somebody's
Isabel.
rude to a waiter, then they're just black-hearted.
Totally, and I so agree with that, and I'm so happy this stories came out because it's shown a different side to James Corden. So what happened in this situation is that he was in the Balthazar, which is a very popular restaurant in New York, frequented by loads of celebrity, and he's been there quite a few times. He ordered an omelette for his wife, and it came back, and the egg whites were mixed with a bit of the egg yolks.
Heaven forbid.
Ooch. And then the kitchen remade it, brought it back out, but instead of bringing it back with a salad, they brought it back with fries. And from there, James lost it. He told the waitress, "You can't do your job. I'm better off going backstage to do the omelette myself." And this left the waitress very shaken up by the way he had abused her. And this wasn't the first time James has done that. A couple of months ago in June, he found a hair which Keith McNally said was diabolical and shouldn't have happened, but he demanded that they give him a free round of drinks and even more champagne. This is a guy who is on $36 million a year. Keith McNally is notorious for shaming out celebrities or anybody who acts quite rude in a restaurant, and this is what's happened in this situation here. But what's happened now, it's been a snowball effect because there's been so many incidents where James Corden has been rude. Earlier this year in London, when a bicyclist nearly knocked him off, he was filmed effing and blinding towards this cyclist. And also on his show, he's shown a little lack of respect for the people he works with.
Well, we've got a little clip.
Yeah.
Should we play that,
Yeah.
Stephanie, and just have a little look?
Name 2 of the cameramen in this room.
That is a great question.
It's a different crew tonight, actually.
So that was Spilling Your Guts with Jimmy Kimmel, and he, James didn't know the names of the camera people he was working with. And, since this all came out, there's also been reviews on TripAdvisor that's been coming up that's saying, actually, when you go as an audience member on his show, he doesn't actually interact with the audience until the camera's on. And there's been accusations of fatism where apparently the show producers have put unattractive people towards the back. So there's a lot of things that are coming out and showing who James Corden really is.
Well, look, we haven't obviously been able to give him a right of reply in all of this. And I think it is easy for people to see somebody who's very wealthy and feel jealous, I suppose, about what a lot of the things they have and assume that they're being... I mean, his defence, I think, of not knowing the camera operators' names was that
they were new,
shift, which I suppose is
it can
fair
happen,
enough. But what's happened with the situation with Balthazar specifically in New York? Because apparently James Corden has apologised.
He has apologised because Keith McNally named and shamed him, because I think to myself, if that didn't happen, would he have apologised? I don't think so. But Keith McNally accepted his apology, so he un-86'd him. So there's a term in restaurants.
What is that?
When you're 86, it means you're no longer served and you are banned from a restaurant. So
is that an American term?
Yeah, it's an American term. When you've been 86.
Oh, right.
So he's been unbanned and he can go back into the restaurant. But, if viewers are going to Balthazar in London, be careful because the same treatment could be available. But Keith is very strict with his staff because he's told them it's not about bending over backwards for celebrities. But the interesting thing about this story, Isabel and Paul, is that James Corden has been quite of a notorious character when it comes to his temper. And even, he was on Gavin and Stacey.
This is the thing, I do love the comedian. I mean, I find him very funny. We saw him on Gavin and Stacey, such a sweetheart. Obviously wrote that, which shows his talent. And also all the comic stuff he did with David Beckham. I mean, he's hilarious.
But
he's very talented.
There seems like a dark side to him as well. And, there's been...
Allegedly.
There has been that speculation of him having a fallout with Matthew Horn from the show. So it seems like he's ruffled quite a few feathers in his time. But he has apologised.
Yeah. And as we know, apologies can sometimes draw a line under things. As we found out this week, politically.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll fix the problem.
It's falling on deaf ears.
James Corden and Liz Truss.
Stephanie, thank you very much indeed. Let us know at home what you think about all of that. Do you apply the waiter or the waitress test as well to whether or not people you're dining with are good people? You know, if you're rude to waitress staff, what does that mean? Also, do you think we all suffer from a little bit of tall poppy syndrome? If someone's doing well, do we look for opportunities to criticise them? At the end of the day, if he was upset about a bit of egg yolk in his egg, was he justified to get a bit cross about it? Let us know your thoughts this morning.
If you want an omelette.
Can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, as they say. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
It is 6:54. After the break, we'll find out the UK's latest monthly inflation figures.
No, not good.
Rumours are they're going to pass 10%, but we'll find out more with economics commentator Laurie Lett.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. The rest of this week promises some pretty heavy showers, and at times it's going to be gusty, particularly today over parts of Wales and southwest England. But with the winds coming up from the south, it's always going to be fairly mild. Bit of a scrap going on between low pressure down to the southwest and high up to the northeast. That's going to keep things fine for most of today across Scotland and indeed much of eastern England. But further west, we've got weather fronts and some heavy showers around this morning through parts of Wales and Northern Ireland, slowly drifting northwards. A few of those downpours affecting the West Midlands, maybe later on into northwest England. Further south and east, most places dry, some good spells of sunshine across western parts of Scotland, and it is pretty mild. Temperatures into the teens in most places, high teens across the south where we see a bit of sunshine, perhaps feeling a little cooler on some of these eastern coasts as the winds start to pick up, and it will be very blustery across North Wales, West Wales through this evening. So gusty winds and more heavy showers to come for Wales, southwest England, and spreading northwards once more to Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn. So wet weather working northwards overnight. Again, further south and east, most places will become dry. Really quite warm night in the south. Temperatures likely to stay in the mid-teens in places. A wet start then to tomorrow across maybe the central belts, and that rain will push into northern parts of Scotland through the day, but turning drier across southern Scotland. Most of Wales, Northern Ireland having a much drier and brighter day tomorrow. Could see some showers though coming into parts of East Anglia and the southeast at times. Again, the air is coming up from the south. It's going to be really mild, 14, 15 degrees in the south, 18, 19 where we see some sunshine. And the winds will be lighter tomorrow as well. But the winds are likely to pick up again on Friday. The isobars squeezing together and that low pressure moving closer, bringing further bands of showers across the country. Some of them will be pretty heavy.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
A PM in peril as a YouGov poll shows her popularity has plummeted and more than half her party want her to resign.
Good morning. It is just before 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 19th of October. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Paul.
Your top stories then this morning. A day of reckoning for Liz Truss. At PMQs today as her popularity plunges to a record of minus 70%, with former Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove warning that it is a question of when, not if, the PM goes.
Millions of pensioners could be out of pocket next year if proposed plans to ditch triple lock payouts go through. It comes as inflation numbers are due to be released within the next few minutes.
Families dismissed and valuable lessons ignored. A new NHS Trust report will uncover the failings and gross misconduct provided to women and babies in East Kent over the last 11 years.
And demanding equal treatment as guide dog users reveal they've been illegally refused entry to shops and restaurants. We'll be speaking to a partially sighted owner calling for an end to the discrimination.
Lots of you getting in touch this morning, by the way,
Yes, let's read a few.
on the triple lock on pensions. We don't know whether it'll be pegged to inflation, which the figures for inflation are due out shortly. Stephen Durham says if we can't support the triple lock for pensioners, shame on them all.
Yes, and Paul says the people making decisions on the state pensions will all have gold-plated pensions subsidised by the taxpayer. And Margaret in Wells says if they remove the triple lock, I will never vote Conservative again after working all my life and never claimed a penny.
GB Views at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GB News.
So our top story this morning then, Liz Truss is fighting to remain in office after scoring a record low of minus 70% in the latest YouGov poll. That makes her more unpopular than her predecessor Boris Johnson, who scored minus 53% the day he resigned back in July.
It follows the criticism that the PM is betraying pensioners by ditching her promise to protect triple lock pensions, causing a revolt within the Conservative Party.
Well, let's go now live to Downing Street, where our political reporter Catherine Forster is for us. And behind those doors then, behind you, Catherine, the Prime Minister will be preparing for what will be a dangerous day for her, essentially.
Yes, so at 12 o'clock, Liz Truss will be in her third Prime Minister's questions, and always a difficult day for a difficult moment for PMs. They prepare very thoroughly for this very public moment. But today, more than ever. Only a week ago, she was standing there supporting her plan for growth, including lots of cuts to taxes to stimulate that growth. Then she sacked the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, with whom she'd drawn up this mini budget. Jeremy Hunt, the new Chancellor, has come along. He has effectively ripped up that plan, Trussonomics as it was called, and put it in the bin. So today she will stand up and she will have to defend a very, very different vision. She is still Prime Minister, but there has been a very abrupt about turn. And Jeremy Hunt, it is clear, is largely in charge in that he is making the financial decisions, he is making the calls to calm the markets, as that has done at the moment. But of course, everything that Liz Truss ran for election on seems to have been junked, including potentially, we're hearing, the pledge on the triple lock of pensions. So there is fury this morning about that, the notion that the government might go back on that. Now, Jeremy Hunt, the new Chancellor, has made it clear that in terms of spending cuts, there will be eye-wateringly difficult decisions, that nothing is off the table. Some suggestions today as well that the cap on social care costs that was due to come in next year will be delayed. Now, Boris Johnson, of course, stood on the steps of Downing Street in 2019 after being elected with an 80-seat majority and pledged to fix social care once and for all. Cabinet ministers yesterday coming out of Cabinet looking deeply unhappy because every department is being asked to find savings. Even with the reverses in the tax cut, apparently there is still a £40 billion financial black hole that he will be looking to fill. So Liz Truss's position really incredibly precarious. It seems to be that the Conservative Party have decided, given her -70 favourability rating, given the fact that even the majority of Tory members want her gone, that she will not be leading them into the next election. Now, she was on telly only the night before last saying that yes, she would, but Michael Gove has said explicitly it's only a matter of when, not if she goes. And although at the moment she might have bought a little time, that would certainly seem to be the case.
OK, Catherine, thank you very much indeed.
Let's get some more on this then from Alice Denby, who's deputy editor of the CapEx political newspaper. Alice, big day for another big day for Liz Truss in the Commons this time. Hopefully, she'll be hoping to perform better in PMQs than she did on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, who would have this job at the moment? It's a really unenviable position for her. I think it was Michael Gove who said that the job of Prime Minister is now a job share between Jeremy Hunt and the bond markets. So she's going to have to somehow stamp her authority and show her backbenchers that she's in charge. They're in a mutinous mood. It'll be, punchy stuff to watch, I imagine.
I suppose what will be difficult for her to justify is, even though she's apologised, people will say, yes, but you showed a lack of judgment in having pushed this agenda when, even in spite of all of the pressure to reverse it, and she only apologised at the point where she was basically being shown the door. I mean, that's the attack, surely, that Labour's going to take to her today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's difficult to see where her credibility lies now. She stamped, her whole leadership pitch was on this economic prospectus, which has blown up in her face. The markets hate it. So it's very difficult to see how her position is tenable. But that said, I mean, Tory MPs know that divided parties don't win elections. They know, I mean, despite all the kind of poisonous briefings you're seeing in the papers, MPs are in that job to make changes, to deliver things and to win elections. And they've been in a very bad position to do the former for many years, with all this infighting, with so many unforced errors. And now with the polls as they are, they're looking in a very bad position to do the latter. So they've got a big decision to make, I think.
Yeah, you were saying that Liz Truss needs to stamp her authority. She has to create that authority in the first place. A lot of people think she doesn't have the authority now and that she's just, in office but not in power.
I think she's bought some breathing space by, sort of giving this blood sacrifice of her Chancellor to the markets. Jeremy Hunt has clearly done what he can to calm the situation down, and I think she's bought some time until we get the next fiscal event, the Halloween shocker, whatever it's going to be. And MPs will have to decide if they do want a change of leader. They're going to be having to weigh up, how's that going to look to the electorate? A party this divided, that can't get itself together, that's been incapable of governing and uniting around a leader for years, versus the risk of going into an election with her as leader. This is what they'll have to be weighing. And the mechanism by which they do it. I mean, we can't have another 6-week leadership election going to the members.
Yeah. And presumably people will feel a coronation is undemocratic, and no Conservative MP is going to vote for a general election because of the polls at the moment. So, it's hard to see where they go.
And as we saw with the defenestration of Boris Johnson, if you don't have an obvious successor, then you end up in trouble. So, people are talking about Rishi Sunak. Well, he didn't win last time, nor did Penny Mordaunt. And Jeremy Hunt did very poorly in this leadership election, albeit he's in a very powerful position now. So it's very difficult to see where we go from here. But I think the country will just be hoping that they can get on with it and actually govern for a bit, because we haven't had stable, sensible government since when?
Well, this year, certainly, it's been very tumultuous, hasn't it?
Yeah.
The situation, I just want to ask you about not the disappearance, the late-night journey to Washington, the Defence Secretary, which was an unplanned and unscheduled meeting, but we're told his meeting his counterpart in Washington because of growing concerns about a possible nuke strike by Putin in the Black Sea. All of this has to be context, doesn't it, to what's happening here in the UK when we're seeing escalation, 30% of Ukraine's power plants being destroyed by Russia yesterday. You know, that directly affects our economic situation, the markets, everything, what happens on Halloween as well.
Yeah, and of course the surge in gas prices we're seeing that's causing so much trouble is directly related to what's going on in Ukraine. I don't know what to say. You know, we don't know what's going to happen. Putin is clearly a very unpredictable and dangerous adversary. And we'll just have to see how this plays out.
Yeah. Alice, thanks for your thoughts this morning.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. It is 9 minutes past 7. Of course, inflation, the government's primary enemy, our enemy, all of us, in fact, the rate of inflation...
Unless you're a saver.
Indeed, this is true, has risen to 10.1%, an increase on the 9.9% seen in August.
Yeah, economics commentator Laurie Laird's here to talk us through what all of that means. And I was talking about interest there, so I don't know what I was saying about inflation. So the breaking news, risen to 10.1% in September, up from 9.9% in August. Is that worse than we were expecting?
It's exactly what we expected. We didn't get a new high. We're matching the high we saw in July, but it's still, you never want to see inflation in double digits. And the question is, where do we go from here? The big problem this month was food. Food prices up 14.6% year on year. That is a massive amount. I mean, thinking about paying 15% more than you were paying last year for something that's non-discretionary. People can't go without food. And of course, the smaller your income, the greater percentage that you spend on food. It's the highest rate of inflation for food since 1982. And it's so far back that we weren't even using the same measure. This is a reconstructed series to try and make that comparison. Food prices look like they could continue to go higher. And also, this rise to 10.1% came despite the fact that we had a big negative from petrol prices. Petrol prices fell quite a bit in the months between September and August and September this year. So we had a negative influence from petrol, and we still had inflation rising to 10.1%. It's a pretty grim number.
And that fall in the price of petrol is going to stop. They're expecting it to rise again, aren't they? Because OPEC cut production. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't think we'll see the violent movements that we have seen since the invasion of Ukraine. When OPEC cut their production, the rise in crude oil came up, but it wasn't anything as dramatic as we saw, say, between February and March at the initial stage of the invasion. But yes, petrol prices will always be volatile.
Yeah.
So what will the Monetary Policy Committee make of all of this? They're obviously assessing at the moment where they're going to go with interest rates at the beginning of November. And, you know, do we feel like we're getting close to a peak on inflation?
I think this will be looked at as an old number for the MPC. I mean, they'll certainly be looking at what the government decides to do with re-rating pensions, because as one of your guests said earlier, these September data are what the government uses to lock in pensions from next April. You know, you've heard the term the triple lock.
Yes, yeah.
That's the government's pledge to lift pensions by either 2.5%, the rate of inflation, or the rate of earnings. The rate of earnings is just about 6%. Is the government going to stick to that? We heard yesterday that maybe Liz Truss may abandon that promise as well. The MPC will be looking at that. Is the government going to stick to re-rating pensions by 10%? That will be a factor. But they are going to be a little bit confused because we have this U-turn on taxes. The Bank of England was very, very worried about those promised tax cuts. That could be inflationary. If you give rich people more money, they might just go and spend it. That can become inflationary. That looks less likely to happen. But the MPC will also be wondering about the energy price guarantee. We don't know where that goes after April. Does that mean that inflation will be higher because we'll be paying more to heat our homes? They won't know what to do with that because we don't have that much information yet.
So we were expecting at least 10%. It's 10.1%, the overall inflation rate. Are we about where we should be? Where we thought we would be, rather?
Yeah, this is in line with expectations. I think where you may be going with this, I think where everyone is going with this is, have we hit the peak? And that is kind of unclear. Certainly the behavior of food prices is concerning.
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen a peak there. Energy, difficult to assess, but it doesn't look like that's going up as dramatically as it was. But as for picking a peak, too difficult to say yet. One thing in these numbers, though, I'm sorry to interrupt you, that struck me. So I've been keeping an eye on rents because we're seeing all this anecdotal evidence, particularly for those of us who live in London, about, 30 times as many people going to view one 2-bedroom flat that anecdotally we're hearing rents are going up. That's not showing up right now in these data. Rents are rising about 4% at an annual rate. They've been rising at about that amount over the past couple of months. But I think that's what we keep our eye on. As mortgage rates increase, if you have people in buy-to-let properties, will their rents increase in line with that higher mortgage rate? And I think that's something to keep an eye on.
We've got a house buyers index. I'm trying to look what the title of it is being announced as well. So the house price index is going to be revealed later today, isn't it? So that's not just about, I suppose it is linked to rental because, landlords put up prices as well.
Absolutely. That number, be careful with that one. That one's a month. It's lagged. It's not as up to date. So we'll be looking at, where are we? August data on the house price index. I mean, always worth keeping an eye on, but that's not as up to date as you tend to see on this.
OK, we've got actually something fresh in from Jeremy Hunt on those inflation figures. So just showing quite how proactive our new Chancellor is. This has just landed in my inbox. I understand that families across the country are struggling with rising prices and higher energy bills. This government will prioritise help for the most vulnerable while delivering wider economic stability and driving long-term growth that will help everyone. He goes on to say, we've acted decisively to protect households and businesses from significant rises in their energy bills this winter, with the government's energy price guarantee holding down peak inflation.
Difficult to say there because, again, we don't know what's going to happen after April. So definitely it will hold down peak inflation. The Bank of England thought inflation would peak at about 13% next month. But with the energy price guarantee, that was before the energy price guarantee was announced. So the numbers are a little bit shaky right now. Yes, that energy price guarantee will hold down inflation in the next couple of months, but we simply don't have enough information at this point to know what happens post-April.
Is that normal to get a statement like that from the Chancellor? It's not, is it?
No.
So this is his continuing his message of reassurance, but this reassurance is directed to voters, to the public, not to markets.
Well, maybe all of the above.
Well, but to have it a couple of minutes after these data came out, it was also very carefully worded, wasn't it? We still have this somehow, acknowledging Liz Truss. We're still going for growth. We're still going for growth. But also the fact that he has come out after these data, I think, is important. Well, so a couple of days into the job,
Alice Denby's still in the studio, so let's get some sort of thoughts on the sort of political implications then of seeing something like that. I mean, we saw it on Monday, didn't we? Very early, I think it was 6:30 in the morning. We got a tip-off that we were going to have this statement from him, basically making these U-turns. And then this morning, as we say, 15 minutes past the hour when the ONS figures come out, and he's done that. This is well organised.
Yeah, it does make you question who's really in charge here, doesn't it? And as you say, an incredibly carefully worded statement. I think, it's very clear that the economy and inflation and the cost of living is people's biggest worry here, and the government is desperate to reassure people that it's doing something about it.
No, it was a clever move to come out with that. And when you talked about that tip-off that we had on Monday, that we are going to get a statement, that was crucial because remember that Monday was the day that the Bank of England said, we're no longer supporting the bond market. Government, do something. You're on your own. And the fact that we had a tip-off that something positive was coming certainly helped the bond markets there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you say who's really in charge. Is it? I mean, is there a question there?
Yeah, because it feels like Jeremy Hunt is driving this message of reassurance to everyone, to the country, to the economy, to the markets, to voters. And Liz Truss, she's done an interview, a few tweets, not much else.
Yeah, and I think he's very much speaking to the markets as well. He's appointed this Council of Economic Advisors. He's very clear that he's going sort of straight back to what we might call the economic orthodoxy after this experiment with more radical economics. I suppose a broader economic challenge here, though, is how we do get that long-term growth. Obviously, we've had these, we've rolled back a lot of the growth plan, but long-term, this is disastrous for our tax competitiveness, for example. We've got some a report coming out today from the Centre for Policy Studies showing that the UK, with this corporation tax rise going ahead, is going to drop to the 33rd most tax competitive country, down from the 26th. How do you get long-term growth when we're in this position?
I would argue that it's not just the tax rate, because corporates were not bursting. They were not climbing the walls, clamoring, saying, please cut taxes. The biggest problem corporates will be this feeling that there is no certainty in taxes. Could this be could this be rolled back if we have another person at the top of the Conservative Party, which isn't, completely out of the question? What happens if there's a general election earlier than we think there may be? It's that uncertainty, that inability to plan, I think, that really scares corporates away.
And threats of windfall taxes, of course, as well, on both energy companies and the banks.
Absolutely, and that goes to the same thing. We don't know what's going to happen. What's the tax regime look like? That's pretty scary.
Yeah. Laurie, Alice, thank you very much for your thoughts and analysis on that. Looking at what you guys are saying at home, John says what the Tories have done in the mini-budget was they gave tax cuts for the rich and screwed over the working class and low-paid people. These people are either going to go back to voting Labour or just won't vote at all in the next election.
Well, keep your thoughts coming in this morning and we'll try and reflect as many of those as we can throughout the programme. But with the time at 7:19, we better bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. And as we've just been discussing, inflation has risen to 10.1%. That was in September, up from 9.9% in August. The Office for National Statistics says rising food prices made the largest contribution to the change at 14.6%, up from 13.1% in August.
The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is in Washington to discuss security concerns, including Russia's war with Ukraine. It comes after Moscow said the 4 regions it illegally annexed in Ukraine now fall under the protection of Russia's nuclear arsenal.
A charity is urging the footballing community to support the rights of LGBTQ+ people at next month's World Cup. Same-sex relationships are criminalised in Qatar, and the charity Stonewall says players and fans should call out the nationwide persecution. So if you're watching an hour ago, we were talking about sleep, weren't we, and the lack of it and how it can actually affect your life chances. 25% higher risk of death if you're not getting enough sleep over the age of 50. That's really quite shocking. And we asked lots of people to get in touch. What have they been saying?
Trevor, morning to you, Trevor in Stoke, says, I have a sleep disorder and only manage about 1.5 hours broken sleep a night. That's been going on for 4 years. I regularly go 60+ hours without sleep, Trevor.
That is dreadful.
60
I'm so
plus.
sorry to hear that. Peter says, I get a maximum of 2 hours a night. I have done for years, since I was a teen. Now I'm 48. Peter, you need to get that sorted before you turn 50, by all accounts. Thanks for getting in touch. Andrew in Auckland says, alcohol's the answer to a good night's sleep. I actually don't know if that's true. I have 3 pints of Guinness every evening with a warm glass of milk and it works a treat. My question is, do you not need to get up to go to the loo if you do that?
That's true, actually, yeah. John says, I have chronic pain for the last 10 years. I've had knee replacements. I now have arthritis in every joint. And with the waiting list on the NHS hitting 7 million now after months and months of going on at my GP to refer me back to my orthopaedic surgeon. So I'm assuming, John, because of your chronic pain, you're not getting enough sleep.
Yeah, well, something Eamonn would definitely chime in on if he was here this morning. Chronic pain, not good for sleep. Mark says, the modern way of working since the Industrial Revolution is the problem. There are different sleep patterns and most people don't need a solid 8 hours sleep.
Yeah.
I definitely do. Do you need an 8 hours?
Yeah.
I mean, I really do.
I do.
The world starts falling apart if I haven't had a good night's sleep.
What about this tip from Vaughan? Thank you for this, Vaughan. Try listening to audiobooks on your phone using Bluetooth earphones. There are plenty to download off the internet. If you are like me, you won't last long before you're in a very deep sleep.
Audiobooks, or there's those meditation apps. Because as I was leaving to come to work at 3 o'clock this morning, my husband was awake and I said, you are wide awake, you need a meditation app. So I left him humming and chanting and all sorts.
Right.
And get back to sleep. Anyway, whatever works. I don't know if it worked. I haven't heard from him.
GB Views at gbnews.uk if you want to feed back to us on sleep tips and also what is happening politically in the country at the moment. It's 7:22. After the break, we'll be talking sport with Paul Coit after Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp was charged by the FA for his alleged xenophobic comments. More to come after this.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. The rest of this week promises some pretty heavy showers and at times it's going to be gusty, particularly today over parts of Wales and southwest England. But with the winds coming up from the south, it's always going to be fairly mild. Bit of a scrap going on between low pressure down to the southwest and high up to the northeast. That's going to keep things fine for most of today across Scotland and indeed much of eastern England. But further west, we've got weather fronts and some heavy showers around this morning through parts of Wales and Northern Ireland, slowly drifting northwards. A few of those downpours affecting the West Midlands, maybe later on into northwest England. Further south and east, most places dry, some good spells of sunshine across western parts of Scotland, and it is pretty mild. Temperatures into the teens in most places, high teens across the south where we see a bit of sunshine, perhaps feeling a little cooler on some of these eastern coasts as the winds start to pick up. And it will be very blustery across North Wales, West Wales through this evening. So gusty winds and more heavy showers to come for Wales, southwest England, and spreading northwards once more to Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn. So wet weather working northwards overnight. Again, further south and east, most places will become dry. Really quite warm night in the south, temperatures likely to stay in the mid-teens in places. A wet start then to tomorrow across maybe the central belts, and that rain will push into northern parts of Scotland through the day, but turning drier across southern Scotland. Most of Wales, Northern Ireland having a much drier and brighter day tomorrow. Could see some showers though coming into parts of East Anglia and the southeast at times. Again, the air is coming up from the south. It's going to be really mild, 14, 15 degrees in the south, 18, 19 where we see some sunshine. And the winds will be lighter tomorrow as well. But the winds are likely to pick up again on Friday. The Isabel squeezing together and that low pressure moving closer, bringing further bands of showers across the country. Some of them will be pretty heavy.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 7:27, still to come on the programme this morning.
Guide dog owners are illegally being refused entry into shops and services. Quite a surprising percentage, 81% in fact, which is quite shocking. We'll find out more about this research and campaign to change attitudes at 7:45.
And we've got the Irish music legend Daniel O'Donnell joining us in the studio to chat about his music a little bit later on.
Yep, remember you can join in with the conversations this morning, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews.
But Paul Coit is here first. Never mind Irish music stars. Paul Coit is in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Very warm welcome.
I don't think I'd be as quite as softly spoken as Daniel O'Donnell.
No, you're
it's
not
very
quite
softly
the
spoken.
same.
I've never quite... I was told off on a radio station once and said, look, could you just be a bit smoother? And I said, well, so I started talking like that. I never got away with it. So yeah, that's it. So I appreciate it. Yeah, I know it was. I was trying to. It's just never going to work for me. So you're a bit freaked out by me just doing that. I can see that. It's never going to happen.
Anyway. Let's start with Jurgen Klopp.
You want to start with Jurgen?
Yeah,
OK, fine.
Who has been who's made comments about Manchester City.
Right.
There's been a bit of a discussion over that. Separately,
yes,
he's charged for that red card
Correct.
incident at the weekend.
Right, at the weekend. What happened, cut long story short, is that he got involved with the assistant referee. There was a decision he wasn't very happy with, and he pretty much lost it and started screaming and shouting at the assistant referee. Not good, over the top, and also it was almost like a powder keg. I mean, the game was... It was full of tension. Pep Guardiola was also feeling the same way. I mean, it's great to have the excitement, but it went over the top. And we spoke about this about managers as well. So he's been charged for his behaviour. He got a red card for crying out loud. So you're going to get charged. So he's either facing a touchline ban, which is more than likely because he got a red card and a fine as well. So there's that. And there's also that Manchester City, this is the build-up as well. Now, he does try to stir it up a little bit. I think we can say that quite honestly, Jurgen Klopp. And what he'd said is about Manchester City, that they have so much money, they can spend whatever they want. And he also made reference to Newcastle as well, and also Paris Saint-Germain, because they're owned by Gulf states and they have an endless stream of money and they could buy and do whatever they want with that money. Now, Manchester City came back and they said, they called it borderline xenophobia, which I think is probably a bit strong because what he's saying, in effect, is that these clubs are very, very cash-rich and he can't do... I mean, he's done pretty well at Liverpool. There's plenty of money there.
That's factually correct.
It is. It is factually correct. And I think to be able to say, oh, well, you're just saying that, you're being xenophobic, I think is unfair. And he said that that's absolutely not what I meant. And I think it's just going, well, that's what you're doing. And I don't think that's right. But also, the other thing that we should mention is that these clubs... they have to adhere to financial fair play, which means that the club has to run as a business, they have to generate their own income through sponsorship, and where we've had problems before is that this is what Manchester City, this is where they were charged before and got a fine, is that their sponsorship was actually from the company that owned them in the first place. So it's not actually coming from an outside source. Right. It gets very deep. I mean, you need Liam Halligan to be able to explain the whole thing, not me. But there's just a little needle, certainly, between Jurgen Klopp and Manchester City. So, yes, he's going to be charged. He's being charged for the red card. But for comments, that's just something that is being levelled at him, and that's probably a bit of argy-bargy.
OK, that was argy-bargy. Let's talk about Crystal Palace Wolves last night. Wolves looked like they were... taking it in the first half?
Well, yeah, I think we could just briefly go through it. I mean, Crystal Palace won 2-1 against Wolves. It was at Selhurst Park. Wolves went 1 up. Crystal Palace came back and won, and so it was a good result for them. Brighton 0, Nottingham Forest 0. Now, Roberto De Zerbi, who's the new manager now at Brighton, has taken over from Graham Potter, who's gone to Chelsea. And for Graham Potter at Chelsea, it's going extremely well, but Brighton are missing him because Roberto De Zerbi, 3 games in, and nothing yet.
Still hasn't won.
Still hasn't won yet. And they have trouble scoring goals.
And tonight, looking at there's quite a few Premier League fixtures.
There's a few ding-dongs.
And there's a tasty one at 8:15.
There is. Yeah, Manchester United versus Spurs. So I will be expecting a call from Eamonn, probably very, very late. Should they win? If Spurs win, maybe I'll make the call. But we'll see how that goes. Actually, it's going to be a huge game.
And having said that, Brentford-Chelsea... West London Derby. Yeah,
absolutely. That's
Sorry, there you go. That's a good...
is that happening or when's that happening?
Where is
Where?
At Brentford.
He's playing at Brentford, But Chelsea are looking really good. And Brentford had a good win as well, so that's good. West London Derby. And there's South Coast Derby as well.
Derby.
There's all these stuff. There's everything apart from a donkey derby going on. All the derbies are Bournemouth versus Southampton. So, yeah, like a good midweek of Premier League fixtures. So, some good games going on, but United Spurs, 8:15, so that's going to be the one that obviously but do I stay up until right at the end of the game? It's a bit late for me.
Yeah.
So
No, I
I'll do what I can. I had a feeling maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you'd give that one a miss then.
Yeah.
Sleep's important.
It is, I know. I've already heard. Then I'll be excited, and then I won't be able to sleep, and then I'll have to take all the tips that you've been going through.
Exactly.
Yeah. Deontay Wilder up for super fights with Anthony Joshua in front of 80,000 fans. Is that a super fight because it's in front of 80,000 fans, or is there a technical term for a super fight?
Well, it's super because it is such a huge fight. So Anthony Joshua...
Aren't all the fights big?
They are.
They're all hyped up to be the big fight.
In fact,
no one ever had a little scrap in boxing.
That's right. I mean, this is a super fight, and if they then had Joshua against Tyson Fury, that would be a super-duper fight. I think they probably call that.
Yeah.
But that was the one that everybody wanted, was Wilder... Well, was Fury against Joshua. And then we had, oh, no, he's not going to sign the contract. Then that's gone away. So now it seems that Joshua, Deontay Wilder, seems very much a goer. Now, there was a 3-series fight that was between Wilder and Fury. That's already happened. Wilder had a win at the weekend against a guy that he knocked him out in one round. I mean, it wasn't really much going on there.
What's his name? Robert Helnius.
Helnius, yeah. It really wasn't a great fight. I mean, it was a heck of a punch, but... He's going to be tested against Joshua. This is probably going to be the fight that will happen.
He
next
whacked
summer.
him out in 3 minutes.
3 minutes, yes, in the first round.
That's one round.
Hey, as Rocky said, as Rocky's trainer said...
I always think because normally you have to pay like 30 quid or something like that to watch a boxing match, but then you run the risk that it's all over.
Yeah. This, trust me, that one
I want my
was
money's
not...
worth.
This one, trust me, was not a pay-per-view. The pay-per-view are going to be the super fights. They're the ones that they're going to charge 30 quid for. Against Helnius, I think they were paying you to watch it. So you don't want to watch it. You know, this was always going to be just one of these warm-up fights for Wilder. So that's not... And so probably Joshua needs to have a warm-up fight as well, because after he lost to Usyk twice, it's like, well, now he's going to go into another big fight. It's almost like step back a little bit, get a win under your belt, and then go on to the next one. So I think probably the Deontay Wilder fight will happen.
Yeah.
It'll probably cost you a few quid as well, but I think it will be a fight.
They could call it the bouts to knock the other guy out.
See, this is... Oh, you're wasted.
What do you think about it?
You're wasted. You should be working in the advertising business for crying out loud.
Yeah,
in the boxing business.
I'm sure a lot of people wish I was working in any other business other than this one.
Oh, now that's not true.
Right, Paul, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Leave me with just the one
Cheers,
Paul
Paul.
for now.
OK. Are you thanking me or him?
I'm thanking you both.
It's good night from me and it's good morning from him.
Paul squared.
Yeah, exactly. Coming up next is the detective agency, isn't it? Mellor and Muldoon. Muldoon and Mellor, actually.
That's quite right, yeah. Ladies first. See you
Bad
in a
cop,
sec.
bad cop.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 7:37, time to go through the papers. We're joined this morning by Claire Muldoon and David Mellor. Hopefully, David is not quite so spiky this hour. Maybe that's a good thing.
But don't you pay me to be spiky?
We do. We love it. But let's start with...
They said I shouldn't send people to sleep. You know?
Well, quite. No, we do pay
I
you
was
to be
instructed not to send
cheeky
people
and
to sleep.
Naughty. Claire, we're going to start with you, though, that being said. And the BBC have started preparing scripts for winter blackouts. It's on the front of The Guardian. Actually sounds like not a bad plan.
Well, once upon a time, I actually thought it was going to be like a story time, like The Archers or something. But researching it, it's actually the British Broadcasting Corporation's duty of care to the public at times when power goes down, because this will be played on FM radio, broadband or whatever. It's not for TV, it's not for anything. So you'll be sitting in candlelight, just picture the scene. Table for two, supper for two with the candles, children very meek.
Oh, you're making it sound wonderful.
Yeah, but then it's going to be doom and gloom because it'll be, well...
So what do the scripts say?
The scripts will be saying what roads are open, what's happening in the country, because people they don't have access to TVs, they don't have access to newspapers, they won't have access to anything. They paint a very,
How are
very...
you going to watch it on the TV?
Well, your battery-operated radio.
Radio.
Oh.
You see? So we'll all need to be genned up for this. But to be honest with you, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's very much scaremongering from the mainstream media, not unlike...
Hang on, this didn't come from the mainstream media. This came from the National Grid yesterday.
Isabel, no, but to be fair, I think the same whip-up of frenzy for the petrol pump disaster, where everybody was queuing up, there was no bereavement, there was no shortage of fuel. This was completely fuelled by the mainstream media. And I think, you know, we need to take care, we need to do a duty of care, take a duty of care on society, not to let things like this...
So do you think they're wrong, then, to prepare...
No, they have to prepare because that's part of their job, because the BBC have got a duty of care and they've got a responsibility to the government, whoever that may be at the time, to put out messages like they did earlier on with the, you know, the Pathé News, etc., that they had during the wars. But I actually, when I read it, BBC prepares scripts in case of winter blackouts, I thought it was something more, you know, once upon a time. Can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
Let's just listen
Well,
to
hopefully,
what
I don't know what you think of this, David, but they'll do it in
So I was falling asleep here. I was thinking nobody needs me.
Oh, David.
Oh, no, don't play the sympathy card. Don't play the sympathy card now.
I could play the... I do my best. No, I think, look...
And do them in that BBC voice.
The BBC...
You know, and they say like this.
Receive pronunciation.
Hang on, one at a time.
The BBC is a public service broadcaster and is therefore obligated to make statements of that kind when requested by the government.
Indeed.
Here's the end of the first lesson. Now, when I go back to being my normal self now, what a load of rubbish. I mean, how can they make that into a front-page story? You know, it isn't a front-page story. Okay. I mean, there'll be endless things that the BBC will be under an obligation, should things arise, to make statements about, because that's... You know, but remember, the BBC is funded by what, in the good old days, used to be called a poll tax. You know, I mean... You have a television, it doesn't matter what your means are, you have to pay the licence fee. And in order to justify that, they have public service obligations. So here endeth the second lesson.
Indeed.
Now.
So winter blackouts and, according to page 10 of the Times, winter war rooms in the NHS. Is that... have the NHS actually used that phrase, winter war rooms, or is that a media?
Well, I think that's more of a media thing, or a quote that they've got. But here again, you see, it's very easy. You know, debates about the NHS are pretty immature, aren't they? It's always, if something goes wrong, it's either the government's fault, never the fault of the people who are actually carrying out the treatment, but also there isn't any sense that you know, it can be anything other than lack of money. But of course, if an ambulance turns up at a hospital where the bed's already full and someone is kept waiting outside for hours, I mean, that's an outrageous thing. It could cost that person their life. So why don't they have a system where they say there's no point going to X-General because X-General hasn't got any space, but you might do all right at Y-General. And I just think this is about... Yeah, one of the problems, and I speak with the frustration of having been Minister of Health, one of the most frustrating jobs because you were blamed for everything, but also the NHS was a vast pantechnicon, and it's a bit like change the metaphor. pantechnicon, you know, those things that move. But I was going to move on. I was going to do something more readily understandable at this hour of the morning, which is oil tankers.
OK, right,
You put a
reversing it
touch
or
on the
whatever,
tiller of an oil tanker, and about 100 miles down the road, it's sort of or down the lake or the sea or whatever it is, it'll turn.
Okay.
And I think that with the NHS, one of the frustrations is it doesn't actually operate very efficiently or effectively on things like that. But I think, once again, a lot of these stories are being given, you know, a promotion up the list more than they should, because that's now something that papers want to write about.
It's not only that, but the public are very emotionally invested in the NHS. It is a national treasure. But, you know, Hamza Yousaf, the Secretary of State for Health in Scotland, actually tried to introduce something like that in terms of if patients or whoever phoned up the 111 and they were able to digress and signpost people to hospitals that weren't operating at complete capacity in terms of A&E. However, I don't think, as David has pointed out, I agree, I don't think the IT infrastructure within the NHS can actually cope with something like this.
And I think this business about the NHS being a national treasure, yes, of course it does some wonderful work, but equally there are some occasions when it doesn't do very good work at all. We're about to get a report from Kent
On the midwife
about
scandal.
maternity deaths. There's no shortage of those in the NHS, because for me, looking back on my brief period involved with the NHS, the most difficult thing was to try and make best practice practice that was happened across the entire NHS. And you get some hospitals that were incredibly efficient and effective, others that weren't. But there seemed to be no mechanism where you could make the bad ones better.
It seems
with any
the
guarantee of
staffing
success.
is one of the biggest challenges right across the board, whether it be midwives, doctors, whatever it is. And, you know, no amount of money being waived seems to be able to solve that problem.
And one step further than that, I don't think people should be able to sue the NHS. I really, really don't. Because I think it's taking money away from a service that is desperately...
But we're taking money away from lawyers. We can't have that. But the Times, you see, has another story which I haven't flagged up. But just 2 in 5 junior doctors now UK trained. I mean, one of the problems is it's difficult to run an NHS when the doctors that, as it were, are so fundamental to the service do not have a common background in terms of their training and what they think they should do in a particular situation.
I think that must be a statistic for later on once the doctors have actually graduated, because there is enforcement, I think, at the moment for doctors when they do first qualify to spend, I think it's up to 5 years working in the NHS as some form of payback at the moment. So I think that statistic must be for doctors at a previous, maybe consultant stage, who are only 2 in 5 trained within the UK. We've also got the rise of overseas students coming here to study because of the efficacy and because of the brilliance of our university system in terms of what we teach. To actually, when they get the skills, they go back home. So there's a massive immigration and then a migration back once they've received the skills.
Yes, and the system you're saying needs to be changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the chief executive of the GMC was rather supporting what you said. He obviously listens to you very intently, because he urged employers to offer more structured support for their growing numbers of overseas qualified doctors as they adjust to life and work in the NHS and to the complexities of our healthcare system.
Yeah.
Claire, Just Stop Oil protesters held over bridge chaos, says the Daily Express on page 2.
Paul, you said to me this morning that you saw me the other day walking down near the Hogarth roundabout, right?
Did you?
You did.
What were you doing? Was it late at night?
In traffic.
You stop it! Stop it!
I was stuck in traffic.
I was probably walking home. Anyway,
well,
but yesterday morning...
Not loitering with intent.
No, I wasn't actually, and I don't need a lawyer. Maybe you do after this. No, what was happening? Yesterday morning, I left the house early in the morning to go to the office, and I couldn't get a bus for love nor money. The flyover was blocked. What happened was there was these oil protesters, as Suella Braverman, our Home Secretary, has blasted them, blasted tofu-eating wokarati behind the Eco Bridge hell. These same people, not the 2 that were up the bridge, were actually sat down, glued to the A4, which is a major arterial route into London. The chaos in West London was shocking.
Yeah.
No one I know has got any sympathy for them. People say, oh, yeah, but, you know, the Van Gogh that they chucked this tomato soup at was under glass. I don't care.
I don't think they
care.
necessarily knew that when they did it.
Oh, I think they did, because they were quoted in saying it. But this is so wrong. And I think the public order bill has to be exercised here in terms of removing them.
I'm sure that the law does allow a determined police force to cut that out.
36 hours it took the police to get these guys down.
The problem with the police is that they seem to think it's their job to allow people to protest, even if those protests are against the law. And they themselves create this idea of thresholds of this, thresholds of that. But, you know, it's a very small group of people, a lot of them quite old, which is interesting, in their 60s. There's a reverend gentleman who's always being hauled off. And there are various others who should be, you know, maybe sitting back having a cup of cocoa or something. But basically, and I speak as one older than any of them, but I say, what we cannot do is have the country, at this of all times, brought to a halt by a small group of determined demonstrators who are not interested in reason. I mean, you know, about stopping oil. I mean, heavens above, what would happen if we stopped oil? Think what it would do to your life in terms of your car, in terms of a lot of people who have oil heating. I mean,
cooking, vegetable oil.
And cooking, of course, is ludicrous.
I'm all for demonstrating. I'm all for freedom of speech. I hate cancel culture. But I don't think this is neither the time nor the place for these activists to be doing what they're doing. It, for me, is spoiling their message. There's people on Twitter, there's people on social media saying, yeah, but did you listen to the interview? They've got a point. That's the danger. You know, we need to wake up, smell the coffee and get on with our lives and stop this from happening.
Yeah. Joy's been in touch with us this morning and says Liz Truss was not democratically voted for by the public. The public membership made its choices very clear with their votes. The MPs then completely disrespected that vote and made clear their own choice. And you
that's what they're there to do.
The majority of Tory members wanting her gone, David.
But that's what, look, at the end of the day...
This is according to a poll.
Yeah, no, you elect members of Parliament for a term, and while they're in Parliament, they're entitled, within reason, to do whatever they want. You can't have a situation where every time there's some change of leadership or some change of direction, that has to go back for public endorsement. You know, this is constitutional nonsense to suggest it. I mean, I know it's frustrating, particularly when a government changes its mind over everything. I don't know if did I mention... No, I did. I've been on since then. There was a wonderful Matt cartoon where two women are enjoying a bit of cake. It could have been one of us. And the woman says, I've had this Liz Truss cake, and if you change all the ingredients, it tastes quite good.
Very
good. It's always very good. Look, we've got to leave it there. We'll have more from Mella and Muldoon in the 8 o'clock hour. We look forward to it. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
It is 7:50. Let's bring you up to date with some of some of the other stories this morning. Namely, and this is going to be a big story today, inflation rising to 10.1% in September. That's up from 9.9% in August. These figures are out in the past hour. The Office for National Statistics says rising food prices made the largest contribution to the change at 14.6%, up from 13.1% in August.
The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is in Washington to discuss security concerns, including Russia's war with Ukraine. It comes after Moscow said the 4 regions it illegally annexed in Ukraine now fall under the protection of Russia's nuclear arsenal.
The charity is urging the footballing community to support the rights of LGBTQ+ people at next month's World Cup. Same-sex relationships are criminalised in Qatar. The charity Stonewall says players and fans should call out the nationwide persecution.
Now, we'd love to know if this next story has affected you. Do get in touch if so, because a number of people who use guide dogs say that they've been illegally refused entry into shops and stopped from using services because of their guide dog.
New research by the Guide Dogs charity found that 81% of blind and partially sighted people who use dogs were discriminated against in this way.
Well, the charity's launching a new campaign to try and help teach everybody the law. And our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, joins us now for more on all of this. I mean, that is a staggering figure, 81%. There clearly needs to be a lot of re-education.
Yes, very much so. You'd think it's something that most people that work in the service industry, most people in the public would know, that if you do have a guide dog because you're blind or partially sighted, you're allowed to go wherever you need to go with that guide dog. We're in a cafe here, so under normal circumstances, anybody who has a guide dog would be allowed to come in. We've managed to get them in to open a little bit earlier, though, so that we could come in, film, especially with somebody who uses a guide dog. Brian and Giles, who's down here as well. I'll be extra careful to try not to step on Giles' nose there. But Brian, this is obviously a huge campaign for the Guide Dogs charity. But tell me a little bit about your experience as being partially sighted and how you've been refused entry to use basic services.
Well, basically, I've been refused in some major chain store shops, just walking in, and it's very embarrassing when someone comes up to you and taps on the shoulder and says, "You're not allowed in here because you've got a dog." And I think, well, the dog is allowed in here. It's by law, you're supposed to let the dog in. It's very embarrassing, and then it's very upsetting.
You've used the words embarrassing and upsetting. How does it change your day-to-day when you are refused to get into something like a bus or maybe even a taxi?
Well, the reason I got the dog was so I could be more mobile and not relying on other people to take me out or, hold me hand and help me cross roads. And to be refused, you think, well, I'm being restricted for what as a person can do. It's just generally like go shopping or just get some bits and pieces for home, of milk, sugar, whatever I need. And they're refusing me to do that. And how would I do that if I didn't have help?
Yeah, obviously anybody who's partially sighted or blind, the circumstances are different, but you started to lose your sight around about 7 years ago. When that first started to happen, how did that change your life?
Well, when I first lost sight in my left eye, I had to adapt to change things. I was still working at the time at the airport in Manchester, and then I had a problem with my right eye. I went to the opticians and they said, "You've got macular degeneration." And over the years, it's gone worse and worse. And now I've got some sight. It's bearable, but like I say, I can't see your features. I know you're there. I can hear you. I can see your shadow, but you have to adapt to change, and that's why obviously I got in touch with guide dogs so I could have a dog. So he could help me get about, do things, be back to being a normal person.
Yeah, and Giles, who's down here, who's so incredibly well behaved. How has Giles changed your life? Because it must be in a massive way.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can go out now. I can go out without having to be chaperoned by my wife or by family, friends. I can go out and be independent, and that's an important thing for me because I was always independent. I like to go fishing. I used to go camping. I used to love time by myself, but obviously I can't do much of that now. So Giles now enables me to get out and meet other people. I can be sociable with other people.
And there are obviously many charities, but Guide Dogs is the biggest national charity for people that use guide dogs in this way. This big campaign called Open Doors, it's about teaching and educating what is a basic law, really, a part of the Equality Act. What do you hope that your involvement, being on GB News, being on the telly today, talking a little bit about your story, might help for this campaign and for the national charity?
Well, I hope it makes companies understand and realise they need to train the staff properly, because they say at the end of the day it is illegal to refuse a guide dog into any premises. So there's certain places I suppose a guide dog's not allowed to go, like star rooms and stuff like that, but generally a guide dog can go most places more than other people, and for them to refuse him it's like it's refusing me, my normal life.
Yeah. And then some of those places where you have been refused entry, you said some chain stores. What about places like getting on a bus or for taxis?
I've never really had a problem with a bus. I've had problems with taxis, because normally if I phone a taxi, I'll say to the operator, "I've got a guide dog, I don't have to, but I do just to be polite, just to let you know that I've got an assistance dog." And generally I don't have a problem. 2 or 3 times drivers have turned up and said, "I'm not taking a dog," and just drive away. And
then that leaves you stuck somewhere.
Yeah, it leaves me stranded. Good job I've got that bit of eyesight. I can imagine what it would be like someone who was totally blind. It must be horrendous for them. It was bad for me, so I can imagine what it's like someone who's totally blind. It must be terrible.
Well, it was incredible that you were here even before us, so we can attest to the skills of Giles, who's down here, so well behaved, but you can expect it because they go through rigorous training, don't they, with guide dogs? If I had my dogs here, they would be running around all over the place, but I don't think they'd be very good at getting even me to link? And how well behaved and how much does Giles really benefit your life?
Well, he's very well behaved. He's pretty much does on command what I need him to do. He can be cheeky. He can be a little cheeky chap sometimes. And if you take his harness off, he knows he's not working. And he's just a typical playful Labrador. He'll crawl on the floor, commandoing as we call it, me and the wife. But it's changed my life a hell of a lot, and it makes a hell of a lot of difference for me. And I'm sure it makes a lot of difference for thousands of people that guide dogs supply these dogs to.
Yeah, and you said when he takes his harness off. Obviously, if you do see somebody that has a guide dog in the street because it's helping them get around, if they are wearing their harness, they are, of course, working. And if you are going to stroke or try to have a conversation with a person, it's always best to ask if that's okay with the person.
Yes, that's the best thing to do. If you ever approach them, always ask the owner or the person with the dog, say, do you mind if I stroke the dog? Some will say yes, some will say no, depends on the person themselves. But yeah, please ask.
Fantastic. We're going to get a coffee, we're going to have a little bit of a chat, and we'll be here throughout the morning with Giles and, of course, Brian.
Cheers, Will. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Giles, as well, who's, well, I was going to say he's hard at work. Technically, he is at work, though. He's having a little snooze on the floor there.
Snooze on the job.
Bless him. But that's such an important point
Really
as well. A lot of people reach out to stroke guide dogs. They're working.
Yeah.
And
It's a very natural response, but I think, well, with all dogs anyway, you should probably ask the owner because you never know. But with guide dogs especially, because, as I say, it can distract them from their very important, often life or death breaking role of protecting the person they're guiding.
Yeah.
So good advice there.
Great stuff.
We're going to take a break. After that, we're live in Downing Street ahead of Liz Truss's first PM Qs since that big mini-budget U-turn. See you in a sec.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The Prime Minister's position remains in peril as a YouGov poll shows her popularity's plummeted and more than half her party want her to resign.
Very good morning to you. It is 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 19th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins. Your top stories this morning.
A day of reckoning for Liz Truss at PMQs today as her popularity plunges to a record minus 70%, with former Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove warning that it's a question of when, not if, the PM goes.
It comes as the rate of inflation it has this morning been announced. It's increased to 10.1% as the UK economy reacts to the effects of the mini-budget. The Chancellor has said the government will prioritise help for the most vulnerable while delivering economic stability.
Families dismissed and valuable lessons ignored. A new NHS Trust report will uncover the failings and gross misconduct provided to women and babies in East Kent over the last 11 years.
And he's had 20 UK top 40 albums, selling 10 million records worldwide. We're joined in the studio by the legendary singer Daniel O'Donnell as he releases new music.
And as always, we love to hear from you. Get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Our top story, though, this morning at 8:03, Liz Truss fighting to remain in office this morning after scoring a record low of minus 70% in a new YouGov poll. That makes her more unpopular than her predecessor, Boris Johnson, who scored minus 53% the day he resigned back in July.
Well, it comes as the latest ONS statistics showed the rate of inflation rose to 10.1% in September. In response, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, promised the government will prioritise help for the most vulnerable.
Let's go live to Downing Street, where our political reporter Catherine Forster has the latest for us. And Catherine, a lot of people will be watching PMQs later today to see how Liz Truss performs.
Yes, Liz Truss has only been Prime Minister for 6 weeks. This is only her third Prime Minister's questions, but certainly it will be incredibly difficult for her today. We've seen the horrendous poll ratings, even the fact that the majority of Conservative Party members now think she should stand down. We've had the inflation figures, 10.1% this morning, food inflation at 14.6%. So an incredibly difficult economic backdrop. And of course, a week ago, Liz Truss was standing there defending her plan for growth, defending the tax cuts, defending her energy price cap. Then she sacked the Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, with whom she'd drawn up the mini budget. She then brought in Jeremy Hunt, who has undoubtedly calmed the markets, but basically shredded Trussonomics and put it in the bin. And even what she felt she was safe on, i.e. the energy price cap, which had been untargeted and due to run for 2 years, that is now only guaranteed to be capped for the next 6 months. So very real worries about what happens in April, both for households and businesses. And Jeremy Hunt seems to be calling the shots. Very difficult decisions coming, an unhappy cabinet who have been told that they will have to find major savings. And although public spending is due to rise with inflation, we are looking really at large cuts and no department is off the table. Fury this morning about the idea that the pensions triple lock could be scrapped. So Liz Truss still in a very, very dangerous position, and she may have bought a bit of time, but it does seem likely that sooner or later Conservative MPs will move to get rid of her as soon as they can agree who to put in her place.
OK, thank you very much, Catherine. Let's bring in a professor of politics now from the University of London's Birkbeck College, Eric Kaufmann, alongside economics commentator Laurie Laird. Welcome back to you, Laurie. If I could start with you, first of all, Professor. I mean, much is being made of the perilous position that the Prime Minister finds herself in. But do you buy that? Do you think that actually she's quite safe in a way, because there's nowhere else really to go? There's no mechanism or candidate to replace her, and the alternative would be a general election. And she now has a Chancellor that's reversed everything that she brought in.
Well, there are sort of mechanisms that are being talked about to remove her. So I'm not sure she's as safe as she thinks she is, although I'm not sure she does think that. But I think this sort of speaks to a deeper problem, which is that in a way there's a real disconnect between the kind of business liberals who constitute the majority of Tory MPs and the Tory voters who are culturally conservative. And it's that disconnect that we're seeing. The voters are looking at Truss and they're just saying she doesn't offer anything to me, particularly Brexit voters, who are now actually more favouring the Labour Party, actually, than the Conservatives. I mean, that's just astounding.
And what do you base that on, this idea that the Brexit supporters are now seeing Labour as more favourable?
Well, essentially, if you look at the opinions, so for example, I'll just give you an example. Do you want immigration to decline or increase? Only 7% of Conservative voters in 2019 say they want immigration to increase, and yet that's exactly what Liz Truss proposed. I mean, that's just one example. You could look at shrinking the state. Shrinking the state is a 6% position in the national electorate, and yet that is what Liz Truss campaigned on. Why does she do that? Because she's speaking to her business liberal MPs and not to her culturally conservative voters, the ones who voted for Brexit, and it's that constituency that the Tories need to win back if they're going to have any hope at the next election.
Okay.
Yeah, really, Laurie Laird, economics commentator, really difficult political decisions to make for the government based on how they're going to help the most vulnerable. That's what the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has said this morning. They will prioritise the vulnerable. And he made that statement after the inflation figures, which were out this morning, 10.1%, slightly higher than we expected. Just give us the detail on those figures.
And that is a real change of tack from Jeremy Hunt, because we didn't hear Liz Truss in the early days, or we're still in the early days of her premiership, but in the early days, yes, exactly. There was not much discussion of help for the vulnerable. It was much more about trickle down. If we give tax breaks to the less vulnerable people, somehow that's going to trickle down and everyone's going to be okay with that. So this is a real change in tone from Jeremy Hunt. Now, what we may come up with, who's really driving the bus here, that's still a little bit unclear.
OK, well, I'm going to interrupt you there. Stay where you are and we'll come back to you. But we're joined now by Jonathan Reynolds, Shadow Business Secretary, to get his thoughts on the politics of the day. Good morning to you, Jonathan. Look, I don't know if you could hear any of that discussion, but of course, lots of the headlines talking about how the Conservatives haven't taken breaking the triple lock on pensions off the table. I suppose my question would be, what's Labour's position on this?
Well, good morning. Yes, it's very clear for us. The government should uprate pensions and benefits by inflation, the figure that we use this month for that uprating is the standard way to do that. I think that's necessary because of the cost of living crisis, but it's also, of course, a very clear manifesto commitment from the Conservative Party. So I can't see, frankly, how they can break it. I'm not sure they really are going to be honest. I think that what you're seeing at the minute is the government, frankly, put up a new idea every day, testing the water a little bit. Honestly, when inflation's the way it is, when mortgages are going up, when business investment's going down, I think that's incredibly bad because it's putting more anxiety out there when, frankly, the job of the government right now should be putting some calm and stability in place. But, of course, they are themselves the cause of this crisis because of that mini-budget 3 weeks ago.
How would you pay for that uprate in pensions and benefits, given that even taking all these U-turns into account, there's still a £30 billion, give or take, black hole in the public finances? That's why we're talking about spending cuts. So if you were to pursue that policy, how would you fund it?
I'm sorry, no, look, the only reason we're talking about spending cuts is that mini-budget 3 weeks ago. And because we haven't had an OBR report, we haven't had a forecast, I honestly can't tell you what the black hole may or may not be. I've heard 70 billion, 50 billion, I think you've just said 30 billion. One of our motions in Parliament today is to get that information so we can make that decision. But if the Conservative Party is genuinely talking about spending cuts, breaking manifesto commitments because of the crisis it created with that mini-budget, I think people, quite frankly, will be furious. And I think as your discussion was featuring, that would be the opposite of the agenda they were elected on in 2019. So if that is what they're going to do, we'll get the forecasts, we'll put the policies forward, but let's have a general election and let the public decide which way they want to go.
You can't possibly suggest, though, that the Labour Party won't be cutting spending, can you?
I can do, but I can only give you specific pledges once we've seen the actual state of the national finances. I mean, I do feel this incredible sense of anger that 3 weeks ago this wouldn't even have been a question mark. But the fact that the Conservative Party borrowed money to do unfunded tax cuts for well-off people, that's pushed the cost of borrowing for the government through the roof to record levels. It has resulted in a major depreciation of sterling. The fact that they are, I mean, if you think about previous sort of really notorious bits of incompetence, Black Wednesday, for instance, when the John Major government got into so much trouble, the fact was they were trying to tackle things like inflation. This was to deliver tax cuts for the well-off. And if they're going to try and return to austerity because of the damage they have caused, I cannot see how either they've got the mandate in Parliament for that or will have the consent of the British public to do that.
But, Jonathan, you do agree that, yes, there will be some discrepancy over the figures, but there will be a black hole for whoever forms the next government in the public finances that they will have to plug, and that there will either have to be spending cuts or tax rises or borrowing.
Well, clearly, no one can deny the impact of that mini budget has been severe. I mean, it's cost the Conservative
But
Party
it's not just
another
about the
chance.
mini budget, is it? We're talking about the context of all of the economics at the moment. We've been talking to expert after expert saying that, we're already facing economic problems before the mini budget.
But not of the context that we're talking about spending cuts. I mean, look, in the 3 trading days after that mini budget, the cost of government borrowing on 30-year gilts, that's a sort of benchmark we use, went up by an unprecedented amount. This crisis was created in Downing Street, and Liz Truss is solely responsible for it. And if she wants to pursue a completely different agenda to the one the Conservative Party was elected on, she's going to have to get a mandate for that. Now, the scale of the gap, and it is clearly, as you say, been severe, the damage that's been caused here, will be determined largely by the reaction to the announcements which we're getting from the government on a daily basis. But there's no serious way we can make any decisions until we've got hard data and information and forecasts. And that is why it was negligent. It wasn't just incompetent, it was negligent to do a budget without the usual checks and balances and institutional information and transparency that we would usually expect. Because we haven't got that, we're in problem after problem. So let's get that information out today, and then let's make some decisions when we know really, frankly, what we're talking about.
But I'm sorry to keep coming back to it. You are going to face the same problems that any government is going to face.
Well, first of all, the lack of confidence in the Conservative Party that's created the black hole, the cost of borrowing going up, will in some way be alleviated by getting rid of the Conservative Party, because you can't just get back confidence that you've lost so casually. So I do think the spending envelope would be better for Labour. There would be sources of revenue we've already identified, so we would abolish the non-dom rule. That brings in over £3 billion of revenue. We wouldn't treat private schools like charities. That brings in revenue. We wouldn't tax private equity in the same way. So when we want to spend more money on day-to-day public services or address the black hole the Conservative Party have created, we have identified sources of revenue to do that. But fundamentally, the bit that Liz Truss was right about, the only thing she's been right about so far, is that the last 12 years of economic policy under the Conservative Party have resulted in relatively poor levels of growth. And that's why there's so much pressure on the public finances, even before this crisis that they created with the mini budget. So therefore, the plan for growth, the long-term plan, is what will be, I think, decided on at the election. And for us, that's about long-term business investment, industrial strategy, fixing business rates, making sure our trading relationship with the single market and the rest of Europe is better than the one the government created. That is absolutely essential. But the balance between growth, tax rises and spending cuts will be determined by, frankly, the reaction to what we've seen from the government so far.
You do seem to be struggling to use, to accept that you will have to make public spending cuts. And, even your own leader, Sir Keir Starmer, saying over the weekend that if and when we do get into power, we will not be able to do good Labour things. What does he mean by that?
Well, I accept under no circumstances a return to the kind of austerity which has caused, frankly, a huge degree of problems in our public services and ultimately was, I would say, counterproductive. What Keir was saying when he said that is very clearly a recognition that if you look at so many different aspects of public life, whether it's the health service, schools, the criminal justice system, clearly there are massive pressures and we don't have a magic wand, we can't fix all these problems overnight. But what we can do is give people some hope for the future, that things can be better, there'll be different decisions from government, there'll be better, longer term, more secure growth, more ambition on energy security and reaching net zero, and that there'll be hope to turn these problems around, rather than, frankly, a Conservative Party saying, you've had 12 years of pain, we're offering you some more pain now, and if we get re-elected, there'll be some more pain in the future. People want some hope that things can be better than this, and I think they're right to expect that.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that Labour just need to keep their mouth shut, let the government kind of get on with its business and kind of lurch from one, as some people perceive it, crisis to another, and that as long as you stay quiet and just talk about vague promises but not actually give any costed figures, that kind of thing, you'll be, and look at the polls, then come the next election, you'll be in power. Can you afford to be that complacent?
I completely disagree with your analysis there. I mean, first of all, if you see the massive collapse in support for the Conservative Party, it's not the case anymore that automatically transfers to a different political party. You've got to earn that support. If Keir Starmer hadn't changed the Labour Party, hadn't accepted that 2019 defeat and things needing to change, you wouldn't have seen that support. And specifically on anything we put forward, so in Labour Party conference, we had our plans for expansion of the health service and for things like GB Energy, so a state company investing and bringing private sector investment into reaching our energy security goals. Look, every single pledge we've ever made on day-to-day spending has been costed, has been hypothecated to additional sources of revenue. So abolishing the non-dom rule, an example I've just given you, brings in £3.2 billion. That's what we would use to fund that expansion of the NHS workforce, where we said we'll do things like tax private equity more. We've linked that to the breakfast clubs we want to put in place to make sure everyone's getting a good start in life. So we simply don't believe, to be frank, in the Conservative Party's approach, which is you can borrow money for tax cuts and somehow this will magically pay for itself. We believe you can borrow money for a crisis, such as the energy crisis. You can borrow money to invest, but you can't borrow money for day-to-day spending. And if we hadn't, I think, had that strict approach to discipline, which some people criticised Keir Starmer for at one point, I think now they realise why that's so important. And we'll continue to do the changes we need rather than just let the Conservative Party fall apart.
OK, Jonathan Reynolds, Shadow Business Secretary, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Laurie Laird, economics commentator, is with us. Laurie, what did you make of what the Shadow Business Secretary had to say there?
Just trying to figure it out, really. It felt like he was arguing a point that he should have argued last week. It feels like the world has changed a little bit since Jeremy Hunt was appointed. He has said everything's on the table. I think that we need to take him at his word on that. And I think this floating of the idea of dropping the triple lock is a real thing. I don't see that this government would float that if they didn't have some intention of carrying through with that. And so when Jonathan Reynolds said this government is just sort of floating things, no, that's real. I think that is a real thing. And it would be an important way for the government to save money to uprate pensions by 10+%. And we could see inflation peaking even higher, but to uprate by 10% when average earnings are at about 5.5% to 6% is a really expensive thing to do.
And let's get the thoughts of Professor Kaufman, who remains in the studio as well. What did you make of his reluctance to shift away, I suppose, from Labour ideology, which is that we don't touch the public services and we keep spending on it? Increase spending on the NHS, no less.
Of course, because he doesn't actually have to make those tough decisions yet until they're in office. I mean, I think this sort of speaks to the fact that actually when it comes to economics, there isn't a lot of wiggle room. I mean, you've got the markets there who don't want your, who can put pressure on your borrowing costs. People want public services. They want low taxes. There isn't very much room, so it's all a management issue. The problem, in a way, with Truss is that she tried to turn what is a very tightly constrained sphere, which is economic decision-making, into a place of radicalism. And you can't do that, especially now. But yeah, in terms of what was just said there, I think it's just very much the case that when you're out of office, you can say these things, it doesn't matter. And the other thing, there's kind of a rule in political science that the longer a party's been in office, the harder it is for its poll ratings to climb. So Labour is in a pretty good position. And as you say, they just have to be abstract and not too detailed about the cuts they're going to make, and they'll be fine.
Yeah, Laurie, Jonathan Reynolds there made the point that if Labour were in power, then the markets might have more confidence in them than the Conservative Party, and so that they may lend, the markets may lend to the government at a better rate of interest, and that may close that black hole in the public finance.
At the risk of sounding unkind, I don't think the markets would have any faith in what we just saw from Jonathan Reynolds. I think the markets do have a great deal of faith in Rachel Reeves. She can talk to the city. She has a degree of economic background. And now we can say economic orthodoxy is now trendy again, because for a little bit that was completely out of fashion. Rachel Reeves makes sense. The markets like her. Jonathan Reynolds I didn't have a sense that he really understood what the markets are. And I think with Labour, pre-Rachel Reeves, there was this tendency to view the markets as this bogeyman, this faceless, evil thing. The markets are really important because without the markets, we can't borrow money. The markets are the method by which we can close the gap between what the government takes in and what it goes out. It does this by borrowing. The markets have a crucial role there, but they're not in this traditional Labour view as this terrible thing, faceless thing that is, out to get us all.
Yeah, and how easy the government borrows is linked to how easy we can borrow to buy houses.
Absolutely, it trickles all the way down from that. So trickle-down works in some ways. I can't believe I just said that.
You just say trickle down.
I can't believe it. Please forget.
Yesterday.
I know. Look at my age. I don't keep up with trends. I'm always behind.
Laurie Laird, thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much to you, Professor Eric Kaufman, as well, from Birkbeck University.
Yeah, do let us know what you think about what the Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, had to say there. GBviews at gbnews.uk. It is 8:21. Let's bring you up to date with some other news this morning.
Yes, as we've been discussing, in the last hour, inflation rose to 10.1% in September. That's up from 9.9% in August. The Office for National Statistics says rising food prices made the largest contribution to the change at 14.6%. That's up from 13.1% in August.
The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is in Washington to discuss security concerns, including Russia's war with Ukraine. It comes after Moscow said the 4 regions it illegally annexed in Ukraine now fall under the protection of Russia's nuclear arsenal.
A charity is urging the footballing community to support the rights of LGBTQ+ people at next month's World Cup. Same-sex relationships are criminalised in Qatar, and the charity Stonewall says players and fans should call out the nationwide persecution.
And we've heard from Labour this morning, just to let you know, we will hopefully be hearing from the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly later on
just after
in
9.
the programme. Yeah, it is 8:22. The man accused of murdering Zara Alina in a street attack in East London is expected to appear at the Old Bailey this morning.
Yes, Jordan McSweeney was charged with her murder and will enter a plea today. And Alice Porter joins us now from the Old Bailey. Good morning to you, Alice. Remind us of the details of this case.
Good morning. Well, Zara Alina was a 35-year-old trainee lawyer, and she was just walking home after a night out with friends in Ilford, and she was just 10 minutes from her home when she was attacked in the early hours of the morning on the 26th of June. She was taken to the Royal London Hospital but later died that day from her injuries. A coroner said she died from wounds to the head and neck, and her death very much reignited ongoing discussions about violence against women in the country, but particularly in London. Many people concerned about those issues. Now, 29-year-old Jordan McSweeney from Dagenham, he was arrested and charged with her murder, with attempted rape and robbery. Now, he has already appeared once at the Old Bailey. He may appear again today, potentially in person or via video link, to enter a plea of either guilty or not guilty to those 3 charges. The judge presiding over the case will also discuss the arrangements for the trial and set a date for it to start.
OK, Alice, thank you very much indeed.
It's 8:24, stay with us. If the daily news updates about the economy or the cost of living is getting you down, we don't blame you.
Yes, we're going to be hearing from the mental health charity Mind and getting their advice. That's after the weather.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. The rest of this week promises some pretty heavy showers, and at times it's going to be gusty, particularly today over parts of Wales and southwest England. But with the winds coming up from the south, it's always going to be fairly mild. Bit of a scrap going on between low pressure down to the southwest and high up to the northeast. That's going to keep things fine for most of today across Scotland and indeed much of eastern England. But further west, we've got weather fronts and some heavy showers around this morning through parts of Wales and Northern Ireland, slowly drifting northwards. A few of those downpours affecting the West Midlands, maybe later on into northwest England. Further south and east, most places dry, some good spells of sunshine across western parts of Scotland, and it is pretty mild. Temperatures into the teens in most places, high teens across the south where we see a bit of sunshine, perhaps feeling a little cooler on some of these eastern coasts as the winds start to pick up. And it will be very blustery across North Wales, West Wales through this evening. So gusty winds and more heavy showers to come for Wales, southwest England, and spreading northwards once more to Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn. So wet weather working northwards overnight. Again, further south and east, most places will become dry. Really quite warm night in the south. Temperatures likely to stay in the mid-teens in places. A wet start then to tomorrow across maybe the central belt, and that rain will push into northern parts of Scotland through the day, but turning drier across southern Scotland. Most of Wales, Northern Ireland having a much drier and brighter day tomorrow. Could see some showers though coming into parts of East Anglia and the southeast at times. Again, the air is coming up from the south. It's going to be really mild, 14, 15 degrees in the south, 18, 19 where we see some sunshine. And the winds will be lighter tomorrow as well. But the winds are likely to pick up again on Friday. The isobars squeezing together and that low pressure moving closer, bringing further bands of showers across the country. Some of them will be pretty heavy.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 8:28. Still to come on the programme this morning. The Irish singer Daniel O'Donnell has a recording career spanning 35 years and he's back with new music, and we'll be speaking to him in around 15 minutes.
And just after 9 o'clock, we'll speak to the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly as Defence Secretary Ben Wallace heads to Washington to discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine and Putin's threat of weapons. We may also ask him a thing or two about Liz Truss.
We might, yes, and loads of you getting in touch about guide dogs, because just before 8 o'clock we were talking to a chap who has, I think it was 2 guide dogs. He had Giles and...
Well, as far as I know, he only had one. He only had one with him anyway, called
Well,
Charles.
Royston in West Yorkshire says there has recently been reports about hate crimes to disabled people up by 49%. I believe the blind are the worst affected. Please ask people to stop this.
Yeah, Tom in Merseyside, morning to you, Tom, says disgusting that guide dogs are discriminated against when the world seems to be full of entitled people carrying designer dogs into shops, cafes, restaurants, supermarkets every day of the week.
Susan says, what is this country coming to? It's absolutely disgusting to refuse an assistance dog into a public place or refuse them on transport. Here, Susan.
Yeah, keep them coming in. GBviews at gbnews.uk or drop us a tweet at gbnews.
Now, whether it was that story that we were just discussing about guide dogs or any of the stories on the front of the newspapers this morning, there have been a relentless series of negative news stories in recent years, whether it be the pandemic, cost of living crisis, war in Ukraine, and now all this political turmoil. So unsurprisingly, lots of us have been feeling quite emotional.
Yeah, it's had an impact on a lot of people's mental health. New research shows people are feeling lonely, isolated, anxious and stressed. So what can you do if you are struggling with negative news?
Well, Vicky Nash is head of policy for the mental charity Mind, and she joins us now. And the first thing I don't want you to say is turn off the news, because I know a lot of my friends say, I've stopped watching the news because it's so negative. We don't want you to do that. We just need to come up with coping strategies, because the reason we need to watch the news is because it's real, it's happening. We need to be engaged with the real world. We just need to cope better.
Absolutely. There is a balance here to be struck, isn't there? So we're not suggesting that anyone should be switching off the news. We need to be aware of what's going on in the world, and we're living the news. These are not normal times: political turmoil, cost of living crisis, wars, and so what we're really saying is you need to know how you need to cope as an individual. So for me, sometimes I will kind of just take time out and not be kind of doom scrolling through Twitter. But then other times I'll feel a bit more kind of able to kind of cope with that. And so it's about trying to work out what's right for you, but also talking to family and friends and keeping that contact with people to talk about it. And that helps us to process and work out, you know, what it all means to us as individuals.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you said about scrolling through Twitter, because the thing about social media is it's made to deliberately make us addicted to us, to keep scrolling. That's why they added the scrolling feature in the first place. Difficult to wean yourself off that addiction.
It really is, and it's about knowing where your limit is, I think, actually. So as I was saying, I quite often will just take myself off it, and when it just all becomes a bit too much, but then I'll come back onto it, because, you know, actually social media and news channels are really important in helping us kind of keep in contact with what's going on in the world. So it's about getting the right balance and knowing when it's becoming a bit too overwhelming. At the moment, overwhelming feels quite a normal, you know, feeling to have. There's so much going on. It's about when that starts to really impact on your day-to-day life that you need to kind of take a break and maybe not switch off, but switch on less.
Yeah, I suppose if you think of it as sort of like gears in a car, if we're always in this kind of emergency, high cortisol, stress, overwhelm mode, it's going to take its toll eventually. For me, because obviously doing the job we do, and I do sometimes get upset by the negativity of it all, I find nature really helps me, and I like a big expansive sky. So whether that means walking along by the river or just seeing the sky somehow just helps me rebalance. Is nature a really useful tool in all of this?
I'm so pleased you brought up nature. It's absolutely critical, whether that's being out in the open air, in green space, makes such a difference to kind of our well-being and how we feel. And what's really good, I mean, it's great to do that by yourself, but it's also really great to do that with others. And the work that we've been doing with the co-op and with our colleagues in Sam H and Inspire have all been about kind of funding these projects which help bring people together who may be feeling isolated and feeling lonely, to do exactly that. There's some brilliant projects. I was just visiting a project up in Norfolk where people were going out and they have kind of facilitated nature walks or kind of food, you know, growing your own food, and all of those things being at one with nature, with other people. It's that combination that can really make a difference to lots of people and build that resilience so that we can cope with life's ups and downs more than if we were by ourselves.
Yeah, some commentators were talking about looking at the Prime Minister sitting in the Commons the other day behind Jeremy Hunt while he was making his statement, and some speculating that maybe she's, you know, under a bit of stress at the moment. What would be your tips for her?
Well, I think they're the tips for everyone, and we know from past research that politicians and MPs and ministers are just as likely to kind of develop mental health problems as other people. I think the principles are the same. It's really important that you have a good support network around you and that you talk to your friends and your family about, you know, what you're dealing with and how you're having to cope, but also about being able to seek help when you need it. Our website has loads of information on it, mind.org.uk, and that's available for anyone, politicians, non-politicians, through every walks of life. We all need a little help sometimes, a little help from our friends, and also from those professional organisations, and we're willing to kind of help. And there's lots of information out there for people who need that additional support.
Well, exactly. We are only human. Even Liz Truss, even Boris Johnson, when they're in these predicaments, they are, at the end of the day, human beings. And, of course, their mental health as vulnerable to all of these things as ours. Really interesting to get your take. Vicky Nash, Head of Policy at Mind. Thank you very much.
Yeah, really important to talk. And lots of you have been talking to us this morning. We were talking about guide dogs earlier. This survey that says 81% of those who use guide dogs have found it difficult to get into restaurants and shops, and, you know, a lot of places that legally you are supposed to allow you in if you have a guide dog or an assistance dog. Debbie says, my assistant dog with an official card stating it is against the law to not let us enter. On Saturday evening, just gone, we went to a restaurant in Nottingham, asked for a table for two. The reply was yes, no problem. The waiter got the menus and said, follow me. Then he saw the dog and stopped and said, oh, sorry, we are actually fully booked. Disgusted, and I was so upset. Yeah.
Gosh, isn't that awful?
Which is terrible. And a lot of you getting in touch with us this morning as well about our interview with the Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, as well.
Do you want to read some of those?
Mark says, typically Labour, no answers, just playing politics and blaming Conservatives. Samantha, all Labour are doing is stoking the fire in this turmoil. Don't try and stroke a fire. Stoking the fire in this turmoil. The worse things are in the country, the better for them.
Carol says, good luck getting a straight answer from him. What a joke. Andy in Birmingham says, another Labour MP babbles on about Liz Truss and the damage she's done, but again avoids answering the main question, how would Labour deal with the black hole? Fair points. Thank you for sending them in. We've got Claire Muldoon, I was going to say Claire Mellor then. Claire Muldoon and David Mellor after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It is 8:39. Remember, the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly is on the way, also the singer Daniel O'Donnell. In the meantime, let's go through the papers with the removals firm, Mellor and Muldoon. How are you?
And we will remove you if you're not careful.
Oh, that's
we'll
a
come
threat.
and carry you out of the studio.
I was about to go to you first, David.
In sensational style.
Let's start with the Mail, shall we? Because it's topical. We're about to talk to the Foreign Secretary just after 9. This poll actually came out around this time yesterday, showing the membership, the ones that installed Truss as PM, have buyer's remorse.
Yes, understandably, I guess. But they're more than 50%. I think it says here 59% think that these are Tory party members, the ones who inflicted her upon us. They now think she ought to go. Well, that's great. Thanks a lot, guys. You know, repentance is not good enough. It doesn't, and then of course they would like Boris to be the replacement. Well, there isn't that much chance of that. But I do think, you know, everyone's bored screams, I'm sure, with this. But I think there's one point worth making. Once a reputation has been punctured, it's like a balloon, you can't blow it back up again. So she has to go. It doesn't matter whether she's right or whether she's wrong. Personally, I think she was very wrong and never thought she was fit to do the job. But the more she hangs around, the more it will make the Conservative Party impossible to rescue.
Sound like a broken record. Who to replace her?
Well, that's what they've got to decide. But at the end...
Who would you go for?
Well... you see, I don't think Sunak would carry enough votes, but I think Sunak, when you hear Sunak and Truss, Sunak's on a totally different and higher intellectual plane. But it's interesting, Sunak is blamed by a lot of Conservative backbenchers and by the membership for having done down Boris. But in fact, if there's any criticism of Sunak, it has to be that he started throwing money around on the instructions of Boris, who was a spend person. But if it's not Sunak, I think that what they're going to have to try and do is find somebody else.
Well,
it's
yes,
interesting.
but that's
Penny
the point.
Mordaunt,
Yeah,
you see, has been speaking quite effectively. I mean, you need to look for more in a leader than someone who can... But she can actually stand up in the House of Commons and appear to be in charge.
Well,
you know, that's
by telling the
that's
House of
totally
Commons that Liz Truss was not
beyond
hiding
trust.
behind a desk or below a desk. I think, as we all know, polls can be manipulated. It's all in the questioning and all in the framing of the questions that are being asked. And if 50%, as you know, has been polled here, and don't let's forget the fact that the last general election, a lot of the exit polls were wrong.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't think we should give that much credence to pollsters at the moment either.
No,
because people lie.
But my point is not that we have to believe what the polls say. It's the fact that the polls are being published with this amount of coverage that shows, you know, in the immortal words of the poet Browning, never glad, confident morning again, as far as Liz Truss is
when we spoke to the political professor Eric Kaufman in the last hour, he was making the point that you've got what the Conservative MPs want, and you've got what the grassroots members want, which is different, and that they need to sync.
Coalesce in
So
some way.
really, you need to get the grassroots members
Well,
to
you
vote for
say
different
you've got-
MPs
but-
and then get the MPs.
But
they
equally,
want.
the MPs don't all agree. They don't all agree.
No, of course they don't. And of course, but you see, the trouble is, you know, I think I dug out that old joke. They all come round, you know. You only have to remember the old jokes, and they come back. You know, are you a member, a pollster says, of an organised political party? And the respondent says, no, I'm a Conservative. Now, that was years ago, and now it's back. But the point is, if the Conservative Party can't run itself, how can it run the country?
Well,
I mean,
exactly.
They've got to sit down in a... Well, I think someone was talking the other day of having a conclave. Was it Michael Gove? I mean, it's not a bad idea. But they all have to sit in a room, and until the black smoke or whatever colour smoke it is, you get a pope.
For the Pope.
White smoke. Then, you know, they're not allowed out, because what is absolutely certain is we can't go on like this. And I think the Conservative Party is in danger of getting a thrashing. I mean, I remember through that 92 to 97 Parliament, it was obvious that the Conservatives were going to lose, but there was a hope that it wouldn't be that bad. Well, the Conservatives lost more than half their seats. I mean, this is going to be worse.
This is damage limitation.
Of course it is, yeah.
Which may play into Liz Truss's hands, which is why they might keep her in office longer.
There's no conceivable way that she can stay.
Well,
And
Graham
if-
Brady's had a very busy year, that's all I can say, and I don't think his year's over yet.
Who's that?
Graham Brady.
Yeah.
No one knew of him last year, and three almost...
No, I think he's enjoying it.
Might
I
be
think he
going for the
wants to
hat-trick.
perpetuate this.
Yeah, well, maybe he'd like to be leader. Look, keep reminding you, but it is important. We've got a member of the Cabinet coming on just after 9 o'clock. We'll be asking about all of the big questions of the day. But Claire, you want now to turn our attention to a story inside the Telegraph, really important story.
Very important.
About puberty blockers and, blocking puberty blockers, as it were.
Yes, well, yes. But the NHS is dissolving the only gender care clinic in England and Wales, and in fact the UK as well, and that's the Tavistock. And I say alleluia to that.
Yes,
It was an absolutely awful institution that I spoke about years ago when parents were taking their children there because they felt the child felt that they were in the wrong body, embodied the wrong gender or whatever. And I said then it was an abdication of parental responsibility to let children from as young as 3 up to 16 go to these clinics, attend these clinics and be brainwashed for a bit. And of course, you know, I was a bigot, I was a critic, I was, you know, had no authority on the matter.
How old?
Right.
What age is it that people can decide that
Well,
they want to
apparently in
change
Scotland,
sex?
that is from 3 or 4.
What?
Right, but down here now. So what this story is saying is that children buying puberty blockers online may be reported to the authorities. Do you remember last week we were talking about online safety for children, okay? Well, this is a good part of this bill that's been put through Parliament at the moment. And it's saying that it will be flagged if a child actually enters the dark web to purchase puberty blockers because they can't get them prescribed because they are too young. Even the professionals are saying that now. They will be flagged up. and they'll be flagged up because, as we know, we have to protect children regardless of, their age, their sexuality, their race, their creed. Children must be protected, and they're not being protected at the moment. And what they're saying is if they do attempt to buy these puberty blockers online, it'll be flagged, it'll be sent to schools, social services, and therefore the police, because it is an illegal activity.
I was chatting to a mum in a playground this week, and she was telling me that her daughter's, at the age 10 children, her daughter's netball team has a boy in it now who is at the same school but identifies as non-binary, so they are a they. And all of the children are cross with their parents for getting upset about it. And actually it's interesting that the attitudes of the children are very accepting and tolerant towards it, and the parents are upset because they see that they have an advantage over the girls that they're playing with. There's only 7 players in a side. I thought it was really interesting to hear that, the sort of perspective of the youngsters.
Well, it is, and it will be very revealing going forward in terms of the narrative that these young children will come out with. But at the end of the day, we need to protect them, and that is not protection.
Let us know your thoughts if you're watching this at home.
Yeah, do views at gbnews.uk.
Now, David, you wanted to get involved in our sports chat with Paul Coyte earlier, particularly in relation to
Yes,
Jurgen
Paul is a
Klopp.
much more interesting man than most of the people here. You know that.
I think we might not have him back next week at this rate.
No,
No.
Mr. Coyote is somebody is somebody I approve of. He doesn't support the right football team, but we can talk football. We can have high-powered football chat.
Yes, this is Jurgen Klopp, the Liverpool manager. He got a red card at the weekend for having a go at the officials.
He did. And this is all sort of slightly spiralled out of control. And what it throws up is that he's now being accused of being a racist. If you look at the back page, we seem to be doing a lot with the Mail today.
Yeah, although this is not related, we should be clear, this is not relating to the red card. That was for...
No, this is a different thing.
This is a different
thing. I'm no racist, because what he says is that there are 3 Premiership teams who are owned effectively by Gulf governments. And he says that's unfair because plainly they don't have the same financial constraints as even clubs that are owned by very wealthy business people do. Now, that's either an accurate comment or an inaccurate comment, but it's a perfectly fair comment. So what is this that he's accused to be a racist and xenophobia? But I do think it shows, the Premier League has been one of the most conspicuously successful things that this country has done. All over the world, it's watched.
Yeah.
But now I think they've got real problems. First of all, with teams being owned by governments, but also majority of teams now owned by Americans. And the American view of football is very different from ours, and it won't be long before they'll start messing around with the rules. And I think it'll be, well, they've no mandate to do that.
Your club, Chelsea, owned by
Yeah. We move, you see. We never have a sensible English person in the middle, mainly because they're never prepared to spend the money, and I don't blame them. So, we move from a dodgy Russian to a bunch of, I'm sure, perfectly charming and adorable Americans, but they have adorable American ideas,
You're winning on the pitch at the moment with your new manager. You're
Yeah.
all right.
And to be fair to them, it was not an obvious choice to take an Englishman. And an Englishman who wasn't, spoke English properly and wasn't really very well known. And suddenly here he is.
360 then, about American owners. And actually, your club's doing very well with one.
They are. But it doesn't mean having a majority of them is going to be the right thing.
But it means sending me down because I'm clearly the lucky mascot, aren't I, David Mellor?
Oh, yes. Yes, she went to the game and...
What, the weekend?
And Chelsea won 3-0. They never do when I go. I think I'll have to give her my tickets.
Who was that? Who were they playing?
Wolves.
Okay.
Never mind, a win is a win.
Right, we have to let you go because we need to make way for Daniel O'Donnell.
Oh, yeah.
Very exciting.
Huge
clear the board, clear the papers.
Off you go. Dismiss David Mellor.
Yeah,
reluctantly wave you off.
But you won't keep me away for long, I warn you. I will be back.
But you can just stay there just now.
Yeah, stay for a second. Don't be wandering off till we're in the bulletin. Right, it's 8:50. We're going to bring you up to date with the latest headlines this hour, and inflation rose to 10.1%. Off you go, David. In September, up from 9%.
Bye-bye.
Up from 9.9% in August. The Office for National Statistics says rising food prices made the largest contribution to the change at 14.6%. That's up from 13.1% in August.
The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is in Washington to discuss security concerns, including Russia's war with Ukraine. It comes after Moscow said the 4 regions it illegally annexed in Ukraine now fall under the protection of Russia's nuclear arsenal.
A charity is urging the footballing community to support the rights of LGBTQ+ people at next month's World Cup. Same-sex relationships are criminalised in Qatar, and the charity Stonewall says players and fans should call out the nationwide persecution.
It's 8:51. He's the Irish country music legend who has sold more than 10 million records over the course of his 40-year career. And there he is.
Daniel O'Donnell is continuing to delight fans with the upcoming release of his latest album, I Wish You Well. And as you can see, he joins us in the studio. And you're very kindly passing me a raspberry tea.
Good morning.
Would you like it?
No, it smells lovely. No, you have it. No, you're here longer than me.
How are you?
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm delighted to be here, yes. Lovely to see you.
So tell us then about this tour. No sign of letting up anytime soon. You just love it.
I enjoy the shows, you know. We'll tour here next May, and looking forward to that. We'll be all over. We're in Edinburgh and Scotland, and then 8 shows in England, 1 in the Palladium and Liverpool and Birmingham and Eastbourne and loads of places. And the album is out on the 4th of November. And it's an album. I contacted friends of mine that were songwriters when I was putting the album together, and I said, I'm going to be recording. Do you have anything written, or would you like to write something? And about 10 of them came back with new songs to me. So it's lovely to get the chance to sing songs that are not, you know, recorded before, or if they're recorded only by the writer.
Well, that will just talk us through how that changes how you perform them then, in that sense.
Yeah, I suppose you're kind of putting your own interpretation on them. I always, when I was sending them to the writers, I'm always nervous because you kind of hope that they're going to be happy with them. The title track, I Wish You Well, was written by a man called Patsy Kavanagh, who's written a lot of songs that I've recorded. And I love it. It's a lovely sentiment, and of course a nice title for an album too.
Yeah. And talk us through the process. I mean, we see it all in the films, don't we? The sort of process of putting together an album. And obviously you've got all your friends coming forward with these with lovely offerings. I mean, do you all get together collaboratively to record it? I mean, you know, is it like in these beautiful pictures we can see? I'm just hold up his book at the moment, but you can see him there in sort of a log cabin environment.
Yeah, well, that's the studio that I recorded it in, and it's in Dundalk, County Louth. And we had a lovely time. Mainly my own musicians were, you know, the provided the music. David was in the band and he produced it, and Kieran, my musical director, he was very involved in putting it all together too. So it's lovely to be able to take it out on the road then and literally have the people that played and sang on it.
Yeah.
I go in and I just do the singing. I'm in not many days. I just do what I know how to do, and then I let them do what they know better than me.
Yeah. And will you be performing with your wife as well?
No, Magella doesn't tend to get on stage. She loves to sing, but not on command. You know, she has made a few albums, but it was really only just a hobby thing for her.
Yeah.
And so she lets me do the singing. But every so often now she will come, and if she's there, I'll always get her up for a song.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you've been making music for 35 years. You're 60 years young. No, don't fancy hanging up the microphone anytime soon?
Well, not in the immediate
your last
future.
one?
No, I'm not doing as much touring as I used to, but that's out of choice. We have 3 grandchildren, and it's great to be able to spend time with them, and to get the balance, I think, is important.
Do you sing
for
to the
me.
grandchildren?
Well, not too much. An odd time. Last year we recorded a song called Down at the Laddie Da, and they kind of liked that. There was a fun video for it, and I sing that an odd time.
How old are they?
The little girl Olivia is 7, Archie is nearly 5 and Luke is just a year a couple of weeks ago.
How is it being a grandparent?
It's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
They bring us so much joy. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, listen, you've been bringing us so much joy. Amazing to read that every year for 25 years you've had a different album in the British charts. That record was extended as of 2021, and we wish you all the same success with this latest album. I wish you well.
Thank you very
Not
much.
that you need any luck. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for your time.
Absolute
Thank you. Lovely
pleasure.
to see you.
Lovely to meet you,
Cheers.
Daniel.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
too. Daniel O'Donnell there, and after the break we will be speaking to the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly about Liz Truss's plummeting popularity.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. The rest of this week promises some pretty heavy showers, and at times it's going to be gusty, particularly today over parts of Wales and southwest England. But with the winds coming up from the south, it's always going to be fairly mild. Bit of a scrap going on between low pressure down to the southwest and high up to the northeast. That's going to keep things fine for most of today across Scotland and indeed much of eastern England. But further west, we've got weather fronts and some heavy showers around this morning through parts of Wales and Northern Ireland, slowly drifting northwards. A few of those downpours affecting the West Midlands, maybe later on into northwest England. Further south and east, most places dry, some good spells of sunshine across western parts of Scotland, and it is pretty mild. Temperatures into the teens in most places, high teens across the south where we see a bit of sunshine, perhaps feeling a little cooler on some of these eastern coasts as the winds start to pick up, and it will be very blustery across North Wales, West Wales through this evening. So gusty winds and more heavy showers to come for Wales, southwest England, and spreading northwards once more to Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn. So wet weather working northwards overnight. Again, further south and east, most places will become dry. Really quite warm night in the south. Temperatures likely to stay in the mid-teens in places. A wet start then to tomorrow across maybe the central belts, and that rain will push into northern parts of Scotland through the day, but turning drier across southern Scotland. Most of Wales, Northern Ireland having a much drier and brighter day tomorrow. Could see some showers though coming into parts of East Anglia and the southeast at times. Again, the air is coming up from the south. It's going to be really mild, 14, 15 degrees in the south, 18, 19 where we see some sunshine. And the winds will be lighter tomorrow as well. But the winds are likely to pick up again on Friday. The Isabel squeezing together and that low pressure moving closer, bringing further bands of showers across the country. Some of them will be pretty heavy.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
A PM in peril as a YouGov poll shows her popularity has plummeted and more than half her party wants her to resign.
Good morning, it's 9:01. It's Wednesday, the 19th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Paul.
Your top stories this morning: a day of reckoning for Liz Truss at PMQs today as her popularity plunges to a record minus 70%, with former Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove warning that it is a question of when, not if, the PM goes.
It comes as the rate of inflation increases to 10.1% as the UK economy reacts to the effects of the mini-budget. The Chancellor has said the government will prioritise help for the most vulnerable while delivering economic stability.
Demanding equal treatment as guide dog users reveal they've been illegally refused entry to shops and restaurants. We'll meet one partially sighted owner calling for an end to the discrimination.
And as the worst motorway service in Britain is named and shamed, we'll be speaking to a man who calls himself the Service Station King. He'll tell us what makes and breaks a road trip pit stop.
And of course, we'd be interested to know what you think makes and breaks a road stop, pit stop, as they're
Somewhere to
calling it.
stretch the legs, I like.
Yeah, I mean, you know, everyone's got their favourite service stations, haven't they?
Let us know. Get in touch the usual ways, Twitter and email.
Our top story at 2 minutes past 9. Liz Truss fighting to remain in office this morning after scoring a record low of minus 70% in a new YouGov poll. That makes her more unpopular than her predecessor Boris Johnson, who scored minus 53% the day he resigned back in July.
Well, it comes as the latest ONS statistics showed the rate of inflation rose to 10.1% in September. In response, almost immediate response has to be said to those figures being released, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, put out a statement promising that the government will prioritise help for the most vulnerable.
Well, the rate of inflation has risen to 10.1%, an increase on the 9.9% seen in August, boosted by the rising cost of housing, food and non-alcoholic beverages.
Well, let's hear what our economics and business editor Liam Halligan has to say with On the Money. From the Chancellor that they will help. There will be help for the most vulnerable. Does that include pensioners? Because you know, for the manifesto pledge of 2019, but for a decade now, the Conservatives have very much enshrined the triple lock.
They have the triple lock that increases pensions by 2.5%, the rate of inflation or the average rate of earnings increase, whichever is the higher. And the way it works in this country is you increase the state pension and all benefits in April, contingent on the inflation rate the previous September. And this is the inflation rate for September, which suggests that pensions should go up now by 10.1% in April 2023. But that's probably not going to happen. And a lot of pensioners will rightly be upset by that because last September, the rate of inflation was 3.1%. So this April 2022, pensions went up by only 3.1% when inflation by then was already, careening towards double digits. So that will be a major point of attack at PMQs that Liz Truss will come up against from Keir Starmer, breaking, as you say, Isabel, that triple lock.
Yeah.
I was going to say inflation was expected to peak at 15% next year, but with this help with household bills that the government's introducing that's going to end, or at least at the moment, it's guaranteed until April, that's going to bring that inflation rate down. So these inflation figures, with that policy, the government will be under pressure there.
It will. Inflation's still going to be pretty elevated next April, whether or not it's 15% or 10% or 8%. It will still be, a multiple of the Bank of England's 2% target, which is where it's supposed to be. I guess what I'd say is this. This inflation rate is for September. It really isn't affected by the mini-budget, because the mini-budget was at the end of September, it was the 23rd of September. So this number doesn't reflect the policies in the mini-budget, most of which have anyway now been reversed. So we'll never know what the mini-budget would have done. It's hard to prove a counterfactual. But what I would say is that a lot of people listening and watching to GB News and across the country will think, my cost of living has gone up by a lot more than 10% over the last year. And that's true because if you're in a lower income family, with respect, you do spend disproportionately heavily on food, on fuel, on petrol, if you're running a van for your work or whatever it is. And those costs have gone up much more. We see from this fine print from the Office for National Statistics today that food and non-alcoholic beverages, they're up by more like 14 to 15%. And many people will feel that their cost of living has gone up a lot more sharply than that, not least given the huge increase, even with the price cap, in energy prices.
And I suppose it's worth reminding people, explaining again, you know, why is it food in particular that seems to be going up so fast and sort of inflating, as it were?
Well, food is related to the cost of all commodities. Oil prices are obviously up sharply. Gas prices are up sharply on the year, though over the last 2 months they're down a bit, but they're still much higher than they normally are. And, of course, we've all learned, haven't we, how important Russia and Ukraine are in global food supplies, particularly in Western Europe. Two of the largest grain exporters in the world, sunflower oil, olive oil and all kinds of things. That has knock-on effects. Look, if you want to go out to eat, if you just want to go out for a curry with your family, one of the simple pleasures of life, think of the costs for that restaurateur. You know, they've got energy bills, they've got electricity bills, they're using cooking oil, they're using meat, eggs, flour, and the cost of all these things have gone up disproportionately. I'm actually surprised, talking to farmers and looking at the wholesale markets, that food inflation is only at 14 to 15%, and I use the word only advisedly. And I guess what this means more broadly is that there will be a further increase in interest rates when the Bank of England meets in early November. A lot of people, that will be bad news for them if they're trying to remortgage and they got personal loans and so on. But I have to say, and this isn't said often enough on television, for a lot of people who are living on their savings, pensioners, these rising interest rates can't come soon enough.
Liam, we'll just have to leave it there for a second because we're joined by the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly.
Good morning to you. Let's start then, shall we? I don't know if you're able to hear much of what we were just discussing, but talking about this latest announcement on inflation, 10.1%. And it's a timely announcement when a lot of the papers speculating about what is going to happen to that Conservative Party flagship policy of the triple lock on pensions. Can pensioners expect to see them increase by 10.1%?
Well, that triple lock was a manifesto commitment, and obviously we take manifesto commitments very seriously, but it wouldn't be right for me to pre-announce or speculate about any of the things that the Chancellor might put in his statement in just over a week's time. And I know that will be deeply frustrating for the people that you've been talking to who are looking at those inflation figures, they are looking at those interest rate rises, and they are worried about them. And we completely get that, and we want to give them certainty as soon as we can. But it wouldn't be right for me to, as I say, speculate about what the Chancellor might be saying next week.
Yeah. So these are really difficult choices that you're trying to sell to voters, that there will be spending cuts, that you can't increase pensions to make them affordable, that you can't increase benefits in line with inflation, and that essentially the manifesto that Liz Truss was elected on, that she's now governing like Rishi Sunak. I mean, this is just a mess of promises and priorities.
Well, the Prime Minister said in the interview that she gave earlier on this week that she recognised that some of the measures that were put forward by Kwasi Kwarteng that she and he had worked on did not have the effect that we wanted. The bond markets, the gilt markets were uncomfortable with them. That put pressure on our cost of borrowing, and that we have to respond to that. And she did, and she took tough and difficult, as you say, difficult actions that has calmed those bond yields down, which means that the long-term cost of borrowing is not as high as it might otherwise be. We want to continue bringing those down. That's why the Chancellor has made it clear that we will have to make difficult decisions. But these difficult decisions are the kind of decisions that mean that we can protect people from those energy price increases, that we can still have the confidence that the UK is an economically solid player on the world stage, and that we're able to deliver on our commitment to the Ukrainian people to try and bring this war to a conclusion, because that, off the back of the pandemic, has been a very large factor in some of these global problems, these food price increases that you talked about,
Look, and we
that
want
are affecting us and other countries around the world.
Forgive me for interrupting, just because we're so tight on time. Look, we will talk about the war more in a moment, but I just want to pick up on the point you say. She recognises the error of many of the policies that were introduced in the mini-budget. But she took a long time to reach that conclusion. A lot of damage was done during that period. There are serious questions about her judgment, aren't there, about her credibility? And, you know, you only have to look at the polls. You've got Conservative Party members, more than half of them, 59%, with buyer's remorse. And the YouGov poll this morning putting Truss at minus 70% in popularity. I mean, Boris Johnson on his last day in office was only at minus 53. She's a political liability, isn't she?
Well, look, I think what the British people want, quite legitimately, is to see their government, to see their Prime Minister focusing on their concerns, on the issues that affect their everyday life. I think what we have seen over the last 6 months is the Conservative Party and the government spending a lot of time talking about itself. I don't think that doing that for even longer still is good news for the people that we are here to serve. What they want to see, and it's right that they want this, is for us to be relentlessly focused on the things that affect their lives. So all this talk, all this speculation, all this Westminster gossip is not doing for them what they need, which is for us to demonstrate that we're focused on their concerns. The Prime Minister, the Chancellor, me, the other members of government recognise that British people want to see us getting on with our job. That's what she's focused on, that's what I'm focused on, and that's what we're going to work on now.
People want to know whether or not they're going to have their energy bills supported by the government beyond April, don't they? I mean, you talk about wanting to recognise people's priorities. A lot of people see that as an uncertain reduction in the support being offered by the government.
Well, the acute challenge of this winter is one that we have addressed. We are taking action to try and bring down those overall cost pressures as quickly as we can. We're looking at alternative sources of energy. We are looking at pan-European energy price caps, which will limit the overall cost. And we're looking at the best way of supporting the people that need our help the most. So there will be support. The support will be over a 2-year package. The immediate package will cover us for this winter, so people can get over what is going to be a globally tough few months ahead. But of course, we will look at how we support the people that need our help the most, whilst also addressing those global factors which have been pushing these prices up in the first place.
Wallace is in Washington talking to the Americans about the nuclear threat from Russia in Ukraine. How credible, how real is that threat?
Well, we've seen a lot of escalatory language coming from Vladimir Putin, and he talks about all kinds of things. But what we're seeing, and what I was speaking to my Ukrainian counterpart about yesterday, what Ben Wallace will be speaking with our American friends, and what we will be discussing with our European friends, is what we're actually seeing, which is the use of drones, the use of cruise missiles. We've already made the commitment to give the Ukrainian armed forces AMRAAM air-to-air missiles to defend against cruise missiles, and we're looking at what more we can do to defend against those drones. So these face-to-face talks are a regular part of our international work to support the Ukrainians as they defend themselves against Russia's brutal attack. And as I say, Putin talks about a lot of stuff, but what he's actually doing is a very cynical attack on civilian infrastructure and civilian targets, which is unacceptable, and we're looking at ways of responding to that.
But has there been an escalation in recent days? Because, of course, the Defence Secretary has cancelled a number of engagements. I believe that he was supposed to be giving evidence to MPs yesterday, cancelled all of that to go to the States for these crisis meetings. I understand particular concerns about the Black Sea and a possible nuclear strike there from Russia.
Well, as I say, what we are responding to is what we are actually seeing, which is an increase in cruise missile attacks against civilian targets, an increase in drone attacks on civilian targets by Russia. So, as I say, Putin talks about lots of stuff. He uses escalatory language, but what we are responding to is what we are actually seeing. So when I exchanged messages with my Ukrainian counterpart, the thing that was in the forefront of his mind was the drone attacks hitting the city in which he lived and the civilians in Ukraine. That's what we have to deal with now. Of course, we always talk about a wide range of threats, as you would imagine. That is the normal way that we coordinate our support on the international stage. And of course, some of those conversations have to be done face to face for security reasons. But we are responding to the threats that we're actually seeing.
Finally, Foreign Secretary, a lot of people will be watching PMQs later to see how the Prime Minister performs. Given that a lot of her agenda, a lot of the reason she was elected by the grassroots members of the Conservative Party has been junked.
Well, the Prime Minister is still absolutely committed to growing the British economy. That is the best way to sustainably address the issues that a lot of people are facing. We've also got to help the Ukrainians defend themselves against Russian attacks because of the very negative effect that that's having here in the UK and across the world. She wants to protect the people that need to be protected from difficult situations and drive forward the reform programme, the infrastructure investment, making sure that people can get to work on time without disruptive protesters ruining their mornings. These are the things that she's committed to. These are the things that she's promised. Of course, we have to recognise that we've had to change tack in a number of areas, and the Chancellor will respond to those changes. But fundamentally, this is about making sure the British economy grows, we protect the people that we need to protect, and we let people go about their lives with as much of their own money back in their pockets as possible. That is the agenda she set out during the summer, and that's what she's looking to deliver.
Really appreciate your time this morning, Foreign Secretary. Thank you so much for speaking to us. It is 9:17. Liam Halligan's still with us, actually. Liam, just very interesting. I just wanted to pick up on what the Foreign Secretary was saying, was there that one of Liz Truss's priorities is infrastructure, but frankly, the Chancellor is going to be looking at the capital budget when it comes to spending cuts.
It is going to be all hands to the pump, I think. We're going to go through a pretty tough period fiscally, and if growth stalls and even goes negative, that's a recession, 2 quarters of successive economic contraction, then the financial numbers are going to get a lot tighter.
Difficult to argue about growth, then?
It is difficult to argue about growth. I don't really see that the Conservative Party has got the stomach now to put through either tax cuts, which would spur growth, or so-called supply-side reforms. What are supply-side reforms? They're often quite difficult problems that people have tried to solve in the past and haven't managed it. Things like planning reform to get our house building moving. Things like getting rid of regulations that big businesses quite like because they tie up their smaller rivals in knots. To achieve these supply-side reforms, you need to tackle big vested interests. You need a lot of political will and determination and, above all, authority. And if you haven't got the authority, it's hard to get these pro-growth measures through.
Yeah, really difficult.
OK.
Liam,
thank you.
Thank
for
you.
your
Cheers,
analysis.
Liam.
Appreciate it.
More to come from Liam throughout the day here on GB News.
Now, a number of people who use guide dogs say they've been illegally refused entry to shops and stopped from using services because of their dog.
New research by the Guide Dogs charity found that 81% of blind and partially sighted people who use dogs were discriminated against in this way.
Well, the charity's launching a new campaign to help teach everyone the law. And our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, joins us now for more. Will, it sounds as though the law really needs reminding to people.
Yes, I think it's a lesson that people who work in retail and service, and as well as just people in the public, need to be brushed up on. And while I'm here right now, the best person to tell us is somebody that's actually been refused. We're here in Lincoln at Coffee Aroma, where they've kindly let us in a little bit early. Me, Brian, and Giles, of course, who's Brian's guide dog. We can get to the coffee in a moment, but of course it must be quite upsetting to not be allowed into places where you know you can come legally, just like places like this.
Yeah, it's very upsetting. You go to a place that you want to go for a coffee or even a piece of toast or light bite to eat, and you go in and say, "Sorry, you can't bring a dog in." And I think, well, yes, I can, because it's against the law to actually refuse the dog. It's very upsetting and very frustrating.
Yeah, what's that experience like? Because I imagine if you know the law, because you live it every day, and you've got a security guard or a staff member who either doesn't know the law or is choosing not to follow it, I imagine it's a pretty tense situation when you are in that kind of an interaction.
Yeah, well, say you can be walking into a shop and you feel a little tap on your shoulder, and maybe a security guard or member of staff will say, "Sorry, you're not allowed a dog in here." And I think, well, yes, I am. And I usually say, you can't refuse the dog because it's illegal to refuse the dog, and that's why they're trained for this purpose specifically. And then what will happen then is if they carry on trying to be insistent saying that I can't enter, I'll always say, can I speak to a manager? And hopefully then they can resolve the situation from there.
I imagine it's frustrating, irritating, but also quite deeply upsetting to be stopped in this way when you're just trying to go about your everyday, whether it's going to a cafe or a restaurant or trying to get in a taxi.
Yeah, well, for instance, I tried to get a taxi a few weeks back. I went to see my brother, who was on his deathbed. I went down to see him say goodbye. I did that, ordered a taxi to take me back to where I was staying. And the taxi driver turned up and said, "I'm not taking the dog." And I thought, what do you mean, you're not taking the dog? And he just drove off and left me in the lurch. It's a good job I've got that little bit of eyesight, and I was able to use my phone again to phone for another taxi. But other than that, if someone would have been totally blind, they'd probably been lost and had no idea where they was.
And it's really shocking, but that's what this Guide Dogs campaign is about. Of course, it's about education, open doors. You can find out a little bit more about it on Guide Dogs UK. I will say that Giles is incredibly well behaved, as you would expect, because he's trained to do this. My Bichon Frise dogs would never even get us to the park, let alone to Lincoln City Centre. Isabel and Paul.
Oh, sweet. And he's working, sleeping on the job, but still important that you're not to disturb him.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly. Yeah, brilliant. Lots of love for Brian and Giles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Will. Yeah.
All
Thank
the
you.
above.
It is 9:22. What's your favourite motorway service station?
I don't know the name of the one I like. Maybe someone at home will know. It's the one just after Exeter that's got a sort of soft play for kids in it, and it's kind of countrified. I like that.
You like that one?
Anyway, we'll be finding out what constitutes the best and, I suppose, most importantly, the worst service station.
From the service station king.
That's after the weather.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Okay, we're going to talk about motorway service stations and which is your favourite now.
Yes, according to a survey of 31,000 visitors by watchdog Transport Focus, Hartshead Moor East in West Yorkshire has been ranked the worst out of 119 services analysed in Britain. So maybe best to avoid that one.
Well, let's speak to Rich Cross, who calls himself the service station king. Good morning to you. We have to keep this very brief, I'm afraid, because we overran with the Foreign Secretary. But please, if you would be so kind, tell us what makes a good and what makes a bad service station.
Morning, Paul and Isabel. I think what makes a good and bad service station these days is a lot of choice. Customers are looking for their regular favourite brands that they see on the high street, as well as at motorway service stations. And I also think people are looking for value as well, obviously, with the current cost of living crisis.
Yeah. Why are you so interested in service stations?
It's a niche that not many people are very interested in, so I found that it's something that I could get involved with and get on board with.
Yeah. And what's your favourite one, or which?
My favourite is rugby, which has come out top on the survey today.
Why?
It's the newest on the motorway network. It's a fantastic design. It caters for everybody, and the brand lineup is fantastic.
Yeah. My dear friend Eamonn Holmes would argue Beaconsfield service station is the best one. He reports people go on days out especially to go there. Have you ever been to Beaconsfield services?
I have. I visited every motorway service station in the UK, so Beaconsfield has been ticked off. But yes, Beaconsfield has got a Wetherspoons, so it's one of the more popular ones.
Yeah. South Mims?
It needs a bit of work, I think. The truck stop lets it down.
Outrageous. I haven't tried. I'll be honest, I haven't tried the truck stop at South Mims, but that's one of my personal
if I were you.
Really, really good to talk to you, Rish. Thank you so much for your time. Keep up the good work.
Worries. Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
cheers.
There you go. King of service stations with his declarations there. Let us know your favourites. We'll be back bright and early, 6 o'clock tomorrow. But up next, in the meantime, Tom Harwood is with you with the
briefing.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
A very good morning. It's 9:30 this morning on The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on GB News. Today we're exploring the teetering premiership of Liz Truss. How will she make it through the day? Of course, Prime Minister's questions at midday, the first live parliamentary performance from the Prime Minister since a series of seismic U-turns. We'll be exploring all that and more after the headlines.
A very good morning. It's 9:30. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News.
Rising food prices have pushed inflation back to a 40-year high. The ONS figures show inflation rose to 10.1% in September. That's up from 9.9% the previous month. Now, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says the growing cost of living will bring more anxiety to families. But the government says it's going to prioritise help for the most vulnerable. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says he understands people are frustrated, but support is coming.
I know that will be deeply frustrating for the people that you've been talking to who are looking at those inflation figures, they are looking at those interest rate rises, and they are worried about them, and we completely get that, and we want to give them certainty as soon as we can. The Prime Minister, the Chancellor, me, the other members of government recognise that British people want to see us getting on with our job. That's what she's focused on, that's what I'm focused on, and that's what we're going to work on now.
Liz Truss is said to be quizzed over her leadership during Prime Minister's questions today. She's going to face the Labour leader for the first time since abandoning her economic strategy in the wake of the turmoil after the mini-budget. She's also expected to be asked whether she'll commit to her promise to increase the state pension. The Prime Minister's battling to convince Conservative MPs that she should remain in charge after a poll of party members showed 83% believe she's doing a bad job. A report into maternity failings at East Kent Hospital NHS Trust is going to be published this morning. It's expected to say that newborn babies died due to poor care spanning several years. The report's findings are also going to show that families were often ignored or had their concerns overlooked. More than 200 cases dating back to 2009 have been examined by an expert panel. The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is in Washington to discuss security concerns, including Russia's war with Ukraine. Well, it's after Moscow said the 4 regions it illegally annexed now fall under the protection of Russia's nuclear arsenal. Ukraine's accused Russia of using Iranian drones during attacks in recent weeks, which both countries have denied. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. It's GB News. Now let's head back to the morning briefing with Tom.
Good morning, it's 9:33 and this is the briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Today, a flashpoint. Prime Minister Liz Truss will face her opposite number, Sir Keir Starmer, at Prime Minister's questions at noon today. It will serve as yet another test to see if she can hold on to her teetering premiership after just 5 weeks in the job, each more tumultuous than the last. Last night, she met the influential European Research Group of Conservative MPs. Members who attended said that the meeting had an overall improved tone. Among other things, Truss reiterated she's determined to deliver on her Northern Ireland Protocol bill. That, however, may be the end of the good news for Liz Truss, as the Office for National Statistics this morning published its inflation figures, with the level returning now to double digits. Inflation has been higher than expected, 10.1% in September, up from 9.9% in August. And now a row is brewing over the pensions triple lock, an incredibly expensive policy to raise pensions by 3 distinct metrics, whichever is highest, brought in by David Cameron in 2010. Now, with this potential change, pensions are still expected to rise, but perhaps by other metrics going forward. It certainly is going to be a very long day for the Prime Minister. Let's discuss it all now. Throughout the show, I'm joined by the Deputy Political Editor of the Daily Mirror, Ben Glaze. Ben, first of all, this is a bit of an odd one for Prime Minister's questions. There's a lot of speculation that Sir Keir Starmer is thinking about potentially not going so hard against Liz Truss. Potentially he wants to keep her in the job. Potentially he thinks of her as a better opponent.
That's right. I mean, there must be a temptation for Labour to soft pedal really on Liz Truss at the moment, because she is turning out to be one of Labour's best assets. The longer she's there, I mean, you've seen the poll leads that Labour's enjoying 20, 25, even 30 points ahead. If Liz Truss is still the Prime Minister come the next general election, which, let's face it, is highly unlikely as it stands, but Labour would be looking at a landslide majority. So Keir Starmer might not want to go too hard on the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's questions at noon. because if she has a particularly poor showing, the Tory MPs sitting behind her may start thinking, we've really got to act very soon now to get this over and done with.
Now, has the biggest moment of immediate danger for the Prime Minister potentially passed? Things were very